Chapter 51. One palm scatters your youthful vigor. Mr. Hero, can you tell us what happened during this period? Stanmont calmly inquired. The wandering hero recounted everything he knew, focusing mainly on his dragon-slaying exploits. Of course, he added some embellishments. Felaman didn't care about that, dismissively saying, HMPH, no matter how powerful a goblin is, it will fall before the Imperial Lion. Count Stanmont, when shall we act? Everyone's tired from the journey. We'll clean them up tomorrow, Stanmont thought for a moment and said. However, from the direction of the enchanted forest, a vast goblin army was silently approaching. Lin Tian rode a wyvern, watching the movements of the Beast King tribe's army. If they wanted to check the cave, they would have to draw the soldiers from Bright Town. Fortunately, everything was developing as expected. As the army approached the cave, the Beast King goblin couldn't help but glance at it, since it had been their home before. At this moment, the Beast Goblin quickly said, Boss, there's nothing in there anymore. Let's go. The human army's territory is just ahead. Don't interrupt. Everyone, stay alert. The news of this operation has already reached the Great Tomb. We can only win. No losses allowed. There's no retreat. The Beast King Goblin roared. The sound echoed through the sky. Even the people in the cave heard it, the echoes lingering. They were so scared their hearts tightened. Just hearing the voice, one could feel the terror of the speaker. Then, led by the Beast Goblin, the Beast King Goblin's army moved towards Bright Town. The sky gradually darkened. In the dead of night, the wandering hero suddenly woke up from his bed, having dreamed he was killed by goblins, and it was a gruesome death. Later, he became an epic-level adventurer, but it was a joke. He felt himself, lit an oil lamp, and was relieved, saying, Phew. Just a dream. But suddenly, he noticed a strange shadow by the window, small and not quite human. When he opened the door, the shadow quickly fled. What's that? The wandering hero wondered, but when he saw goblins scurrying around the town square, he was dumbfounded. Was this a dream? No, it wasn't. He immediately shouted, Enemy attack. Goblin invasion. Instantly, the dim town lit up, and soldiers and newly arrived adventurers rushed out. Counts Felaman and Stanmont also quickly ordered, All soldiers, assemble. While speaking, they sliced through a small goblin with a sword. In less than 3 minutes, all the resting soldiers had donned armor and gathered with weapons. Bright Town was nearly empty, with enough rooms for several soldiers each. Although sentries were arranged, they almost caused a catastrophe. Felaman stared at the distant forest, seeing numerous pairs of scarlet eyes, densely packed and terrifying. Stanmont looked at the watchtower and understood, they managed to silently eliminate the sentries. Thanks to Mr. Hero, or we might have suffered heavy losses. HMPH, useless. The wandering hero said arrogantly. In the distance, the Beast King Goblin's eyes flashed coldly, so many soldiers. Good thing we didn't launch a direct attack. In such a dense environment, we're no match. Small goblins in narrow spaces were easy to cut down in droves. They had some fighting power in open areas. The wandering hero felt an ominous premonition and stepped back a few steps, sensing something amiss. Felaman saw the cavalry had remounted and signaled with his sword, Charge. Crush them, Imperial Lions. The sound of iron hooves pounding the ground roared continuously. 800 spearmen, holding shields high, charged into the darkness. Everyone's hearts were tense. Inside, the clash of weapons, goblin screams, human agony, and hoarse whinnies could be heard. At this moment, strange winds blew away the dark clouds. The moonlight shone down. It was Lin Tian riding his wyvern, watching everything below. He saw the warhorses scatter the goblins gathered together. A bloody, beautiful slaughter. Then, the infantry began to advance. The scattered goblins were easily dealt with like chopping vegetables. Felaman snorted, I told you, goblins are nothing but low-level trash. Why consider them a threat? At this rate, the battle would be over in less than an hour. But suddenly, the situation changed. Bang! A batch of warhorses was thrown over by something unknown. They heavily crashed beside Felaman and the others. One could see the carnivorous horses along with their riders crushed together, dead in a twisted and horrific manner. It was the Beast King Goblin. He had made his move, like an enraged gorilla, grabbing a rider and smashing them together with their carnivorous horse. Other hero variants also began to resist. The cavalry was forced to keep their distance. Moreover, that mutant variant had even taken control of a dozen soldiers. What is that thing? Goblins are too disgusting. Lin Tian cursed as he watched this scene. The mutant goblin, about 1.6 meters tall, appeared to be decaying and mushy all over. From its sensitive body parts, long tentacles extended, piercing the soldiers' heads. These soldiers were controlled like puppets. Seeing the situation quickly reverse, Stantmont immediately ordered, retreat. All the soldiers began to fall back, their previous high spirits greatly diminished. The Beast King Goblin's oppressive presence was too overwhelming. Under the moonlight, his huge figure, blood-red eyes, and the scene of him devouring a carnivorous horse in a few bites were too shocking. He seemed like a wild beast that no one could control. A Beast King. Philemon, with a vigilant tone, said, "It seems indeed difficult to deal with." "What is that thing? Is it an overlord variant?" "Not sure. Leave it to the family experts," Stantmont said gravely. From behind, a dozen people stepped forward, all dressed in high-quality armor. They were true nobles, like Cecil and Loder, and quite powerful. "Father, we'll distract that thing. Leave the rest to the soldiers." A girl with a golden ponytail solemnly said. She was Loder's cousin, Lorna. She wasn't an adventurer, but she hadn't neglected her training. She was far more powerful than Loder. Stantmont nodded. "Be careful. For the honor of the Stantmont family, don't be a disgrace like your brother." "Yes, sir," Lorna replied and swiftly led the dozen people into action. They skillfully avoided the small goblin's harassment and the hero variant's attacks, reaching the Beast King Goblin. One of them used magic, launching an explosion at his head. However, the effect was minimal. But it effectively enraged him, causing him to roar and chase after the dozen people. Lin Tian thought to himself, "This isn't good. If they keep running, they'll run into his group." Fortunately, they didn't get far before the Beast King Goblin stopped. He wasn't too stupid and realized they were trying to lure him away. Lin Tian curiously checked their attributes. Beast King Goblin. LV 79. Race. Goblin. Profession. None. Title. Beast King, Tomb Apostle, Extreme Sin, God's Blessing. Health. 2000. Strength. 630. Defense. 570. Skills. Beast King's Roar, Brutal Strike, Armor Skin. Equipment. None. Overall. 2800. He didn't expect this guy's power to be so monstrous. Lin Tian was slightly surprised. Even he couldn't beat him in a one-on-one fight. No wonder he was a monster from the enchanted forest, far more brutal than imagined. Tisk tisk tisk. What a pity. That golden ponytail girl is doomed. Lin Tian sighed regretfully. Her overall strength was only 1700, and the others were around 1000. They stood no chance. Combat strength wasn't additive. 2 at 2000 couldn't match 1 at 4000. The difference was too vast. The young magician wanted to launch another explosion spell at the Beast King Goblin, laughing arrogantly as he approached. Lorna hurriedly stopped him. "Don't go. We need to work together to restrain him." "It's fine, sis. I'm attacking from a distance. He can't hit me." The young man relished the thrill, finding it exciting and fun. From about 10 meters away, he began to chant a spell, the red crystal ball in his hand gradually charging. This magic attack had a long range, but it took about a second to cast, not an instant strike. The Beast King Goblin locked his cold, creepy eyes on him. In the next moment, the young magician, who had been laughing, suddenly felt something was wrong. Goosebumps rose all over his body, and his legs seemed weak, about to collapse. In a blink, the Beast King Goblin dashed in front of him. A large, dark hand reached for him. Closer and closer. He could see the palm lines and rough calluses. Smack. A gruesome sound rang out. The young magician, barely a teenager, was smashed to pieces. His body flew back to Lorna and the others. A hand here, a head there. Parts were scattered everywhere. The Beast King Goblin licked the blood on his hand, such a tender taste, he. His large mouth grinned, revealing sharp teeth. Brother, I will avenge you," a young man angrily shouted, drawing his longsword to attack. They were all from the same family, all relatives. Watching his brother get killed made him furious. Moreover, the young magician was a promising talent, a new star of the family. He had been recognized by a grand mage, expected to inherit his white magic hat. Now, he couldn't even be pieced together. TL. In China, Chinese, people call friends, brother, as in, bro. However, it's also fine to call cousins, brother, and sister. I don't know why Lorna is his daughter though. Just ignore it. Chapter 52. Hero, it's your turn, don't run away. Lorna was also shocked and quickly restrained the young man. Wait. Don't be impulsive. We need to restrain him together. Several people hurriedly held the young man back. Otherwise, he might have ended up like the boy earlier. Everyone, spread out and surround him. Lorna commanded. It was clear she was also very nervous, possibly because this was her first real battle. After all, everyone's first time would be like this. The group did as told, clearly shaken by the earlier scene. A vibrant life turned into a heap before their eyes. The Beast King Goblin, full of disdain, prepared to kill the young man. But as he moved, attacks flew at him from all sides. Arrows, magic, and even close combat strikes left him no room to react. Once they spread out, the Beast King Goblin didn't know who to attack first. If he attacked one, the others would focus their attacks on him. He was bound to get hurt. Seeing the current situation, Lorna smiled with relief but quickly became vigilant again, silently cheering herself on. Come on, Lorna, stay focused. You're a role model at the academy. Now you need to set an example and lead everyone to win this first real battle. These nobles attended elite schools, taught by powerful adventurers, retired warriors, and other instructors. Although they had practical training under their teacher's supervision, it didn't really count. Now, this was a real battle. But just in those few seconds of Lorna being distracted, the young man still couldn't escape being slaughtered. The Beast King Goblin punched the ground, transmitting force and killing the young man on the spot. His body twisted, as if crumpled into a ball. Because all his bones were shattered, he lost all support. Cousin. Lorna's heart shook with guilt. Everyone, dodge and keep attacking him. We can definitely wear him down. Everyone followed her orders and started attacking. The effect was very noticeable. Under constant attack, the Beast King Goblin's crocodile skin armor protected his back, but other areas began showing significant injuries. Great. Keep it up. This mere goblin, your teeth will be our first trophy. Don't let up. Continue attacking. Buy Lorna time to land a fatal blow. Everyone felt hopeful and went all out. Lorna, holding a white jade long spear, circled the Beast King Goblin, looking for an opportunity to strike with the holy spear. Her slender figure was hard to catch at high speed. Her long ponytail streamed behind her, and her serious expression was very captivating. Got it. As the Beast King Goblin attacked others nearby, Lorna locked onto his side, aiming for his kidney. She raised the spear and infused it with power, high-tier martial skill Holy Spear of Exorcism. The golden spearhead glowed with holy light. She fiercely stabbed into the Beast King's kidney. Immediately, he howled in pain. Holy power infused, and from the wound, cracks spread like a spiderweb. The Beast King Goblin, furious, veins bulging with rage. He glared at Lorna. Damn woman, you were making noise the whole time, annoying me, and now you dare sneak attack me. The Beast King Goblin gritted his teeth and said. Seeing the situation was bad, Lorna prepared to flee. But the spearhead was stuck in the Beast King Goblin's rib, and she couldn't pull it out. Others realized the danger. Oh no, quick, save Sister Lorna. As everyone rushed to attack him, the Beast King Goblin showed a sinister smile, exactly what he wanted. Otherwise, he could have killed Lorna first. Then he opened his bloody mouth and took a deep breath. Roar. He used his innate skill, Beast King's Roar. It unleashed a powerful sonic attack on those nearby, causing severe dizziness. The terrifying roar echoed through the world. The space seemed to ripple and twist. Those close to him, within seconds, rolled their eyes and stood dazed. Blood flowed from their ears, eyes, and nostrils. Their brains lost all consciousness. Some who hadn't fully relieved themselves today, did so now. Including Lorna, who stood frozen, her eyes rolling back, even foaming at the mouth. The Beast King Goblin, enduring the pain, pulled the spear from his kidney. Then, with a sweeping strike, he impaled 5 unconscious people, nailing them to the ground. The rest were swatted like mosquitoes, one smack at a time. The sound of flesh and bone shattering was hair-raising. At this point, Lorna regained some consciousness but stumbled and fell, turning her head to see familiar faces. They were skewered by her spear, piled like a human pyramid. Their heads tilted in one direction, eyes rolled back, bleeding from their features, seemingly looking at Lorna, silently voicing their suffering. Lorna screamed in fear. Looking around, she found no trace of anyone else. She had no idea what had just happened. However, the pools of blood and flesh on the ground gave her a pretty good idea. Why is this happening? This is nothing like what they taught at the academy. How could there be such a powerful goblin? Why can't I even handle it? Lorna trembled in terror, her head aching. At the academy, She had always been a top student, excelling in both combat skills and theoretical knowledge. But now, it seemed luck no longer favored her. She couldn't accept such a failure. At this moment, the Beast King Goblin growled, "It's your turn, annoying fly." He reached out, ready to grab Lorna. At this critical moment, Lorna seemed to awaken. "I can't lose. I must avenge everyone." She quickly regained full consciousness, ready to rise and continue fighting. But the next second, crack, the sound of bones shattering filled the air. Lorna felt a piercing pain shoot from her feet straight to her brain. Ah! Looking down, she saw her feet had been crushed by the Beast King Goblin. Next were her hands. The sound of bones breaking was excruciatingly loud, causing intense pain to anyone who heard it. Lorna screamed with all her might, nearly losing consciousness, drooling uncontrollably. "Father! Teacher! Save me!" On the other side of the hill, Stantmont's heart tightened at hearing her pained cries for help. "Lorna!" He was about to rush over. Philemon sternly shouted, "Count! We are the commanders, we cannot fall. In a battle, if the enemy leader died, it meant certain defeat. With morale greatly reduced, soldiers would think of nothing but escaping, losing all combat ability. My daughter. Are they all dead?" Stantmont trembled with grief and anger, his teeth nearly breaking from clenching so hard. Philemon was not much better off. Many of the people over there were his children or family members. At this moment, the silhouette of the Beast King Goblin appeared again on the hill. He was holding a delicate figure, but was defiling it, as if playing with a toy. Through the moonlit shadow, one could see the long ponytail swaying with the Beast King Goblin's movements. It was clearly Lorna's body. Ha ha ha. The Beast King Goblin's unrestrained laughter echoed, then he began eating Lorna's body bite by bite like a cucumber. Damn beast. This scene, engraved deeply in Stantmont's eyes, made him unable to hold back any longer. Even though he hadn't been an Imperial warrior for many years, the battle spirit in his heart was reignited by rage. He raised his sword and charged through the chaotic battle. Philemon shouted, "Count, come back. We are about to win." But it was futile. If he hadn't seen that scene, Stantmont could have held back. After all, he had led troops in battle before. As a leader, he understood the importance of the bigger picture. But those scenes, anyone would find it unbearable to see their daughter treated like that. HMPH. The Beast King Goblin sneered coldly, also charging towards Count Stantmont. His speed increased, and in 10 seconds, he reached Stantmont, swinging his massive fists down. Count Stantmont raised his sword to block, but his strength was insufficient. Years without fighting had severely diminished his overall strength. Now, he barely had a combat strength of 1500. In his prime on the Imperial battlefield, he had a combat strength of 3000 and could have easily won. But now, he was sent flying with one punch. He landed amidst the chaotic battle. "Count, what's wrong?" A shield bearer, shocked, rushed to protect him from other goblins. But while he could fend off ordinary goblins, he couldn't withstand the overwhelming strength of the Beast King Goblin. The Beast King Goblin leapt over, flinging the shield bearer aside, and grabbed Stantmont, ready to crush him. However, he overlooked the fact that there were no more goblins around, mostly Imperial soldiers. Several spears immediately pierced his body. The Beast King Goblin howled in pain, throwing Stantmont aside and swinging his fists to repel the fully armored soldiers. But as more soldiers surrounded him, he began to lose ground. Fully armored soldiers were different from the earlier young ones, not easily killed in one blow, and they fought fiercely. Shield bearers blocked the front, while cavalry stabbed him repeatedly. One shield bearer could be flung away, but several together, their shields locked, couldn't be broken through no matter how strong he was. The shields had clasps, perfect for encircling. However, the spears could only inflict superficial wounds, making it difficult to kill him. Hero. Quick. Deliver a fatal blow. On the ground, Stantmont gritted his teeth, looking back at the wandering hero. Chapter 53. Overlord level. Brutal Goblin. The wandering hero almost lost his soul when he was called out like that. Looking at the ferocious and terrifying Beast King Goblin, just the sight of it made his hands tremble. Coupled with the dream he had just had, he didn't dare to step forward. This was not the time for romantic hero fantasies, but a real-life slaughter scene. Those geniuses, nobles, and battle-hardened soldiers could all die in the next second. There were no miracles, no hope. The wandering hero stood frozen, not knowing what to do. At this moment, the connected silver shield wall was almost about to collapse. The Beast King Goblin grabbed a knight and used him as a weapon, constantly blocking the attacks of the Lancers. Afraid of stabbing their own men, they couldn't attack. This gave him a chance to catch his breath. Seeing this, Standmont struggled to his feet with all his might, his leg visibly broken, but he still hobbled forward. Philemon was about to say something, but Standmont raised his hand to interrupt. Count, you can't die, but I can. Let me do it. Seeing such a passionate scene from an elderly man, the wandering hero's conscience finally awoke. Swish. A dashing figure brushed past Standmont. His flowing, slightly curly black hair and scruffy beard looked particularly handsome and dashing at this moment. The wandering hero held 2 magic balls in his hand, leaping over soldiers onto the shield wall, high-level magic converging energy sphere. Fusion. The 2 light balls began to merge into one giant light ball. Immediately after, the wandering hero jumped into the center of the shield wall, preparing to unleash the light ball. The Beast King Goblin sensed danger and activated the skill Brutal Strike. A fierce black wind swirled around his fist. However, the wandering hero did not fear, facing the attack head-on. Boom. In the pitch-black night, a dazzling white light burst forth. Standmont and the others in the distance couldn't even open their eyes from the brightness. The sturdy shield wall was also disintegrated by the explosion of the light ball. Other goblins still fighting soldiers on the mountain lost their will to fight upon seeing this commotion and began to think of fleeing. It was clear that the Beast King Goblin was likely dead. Huff, huff, did I win? As the light faded, the wandering hero gasped. Before him was a blood-soaked corpse, the ground sunken in where it lay. Finally, the wandering hero smiled, confirming, I won. He had won. He led the Empire's soldiers to defeat the leader Goblin and saved 2 counts. The title of Epic Adventurer was secured. Standmont also breathed a slight sigh of relief, but then ordered, pursue the remaining goblins, leave none alive. Just as the wandering hero was about to kill the other goblins. Suddenly, a bloody maw lunged at him, his legs still rooted to the spot. Above the waist, his body was already gone. It turned out the Beast King Goblin wasn't dead, its bloody body barely holding on, gnawing and swallowing the wandering hero. The sound of crunching bones was clearly audible. Standmont was stunned, but quickly charged again with his sword. Damn beast. He aimed to kill it while it was still weak and heavily wounded. However, at this moment, the Beast King Goblin's body began to mutate. It had devoured the wandering hero, and having consumed many others before, it was now evolving. Count Standmont, run! Behind him, Philemon shouted. Because it was already too late. The Beast King Goblin's hands began to grow claws, tearing at its own head. It ripped off a layer of skin. Following that, in a new form, like a newborn covered in amniotic fluid, it had many sticky fluids on it. Its size remained about the same, but the crocodile-like back scales, previously only on its back, now covered its entire body. It looked almost nothing like a goblin anymore, with 4 long and sharp fangs resembling a cutting machine, capable of easily tearing through flesh. Thick black mane grew around its neck and sparsely on its body. Its eyes, in the dark night, were pure white and glowed. They seemed to pierce through everyone's soul. Its stance resembled a hungry tiger ready to hunt, with sharp claws on its hands and feet, and a tail. Its chest and arm muscles were robust, like a raging gorilla. Lin Tian looked at the creature in astonishment. He muttered, as this overlord level 80, brutal goblin. His overall strength broke through the 3,000 mark. It actually reached 3,100. Since it had just evolved, its overall combat power rating wouldn't increase much. But its attributes had grown significantly. Breaking through 3,000 made it a terrifying existence. Brutal faced Standmont's attacking sword and simply pinched it with its claw. It caught the longsword aimed at it. With a slight force, crack. The fine longsword snapped in half. Standmont was dumbfounded. Before he could finish, the broken sword blade pierced his heart, and Brutal tossed him into its mouth. Damn it, if this guy eats everything, what am I going to eat? Lin Tian cursed as he watched from a distance. At this point, it was clear that the humans were going to lose. It seemed he needed to intervene and suppress this brutal creature. He needed both sides to be severely wounded so he could gather the experience points and evolve into a hero variant. At this moment, Philemon shouted loudly, all soldiers, attack that creature. From afar, the soldiers who had been suppressing the goblin army turned around and saw the most terrifying thing they had ever encountered. They had never seen a creature that exuded such a chilling aura. It was even more terrifying than the berserk soldiers on the battlefield. Crucially, They saw Stantmont's broken sword on the ground, indicating that he was dead. Brutal, furious to the extreme, charged at the group of soldiers. Their hands trembled as they held their weapons. However, unexpectedly, Brutal did not attack them but instead bypassed them, killing several hero variants next to the goblins. I said, if anyone tries to escape, they will die. Boss, we won't run anymore. A heavy armored hero variant goblin pleaded. But in the next second, the goblin was torn apart by Brutal's claws, the heavy armor as thin as paper in its hands. Brutal glared at the other goblins. All of you, attack. If anyone takes even half a step back, this will be your fate. With that, the remaining goblins all launched a counterattack. Fighting might not kill them, but not fighting would certainly mean death at the hands of Brutal. Facing the goblin army, now reorganized by Brutal, the humans began to panic. The death of Stantmont was one thing, but the terrifying Brutal goblin was their true nightmare. The oppressive force was insurmountable. Soon, the humans were driven back into Bright Town. The ground was covered with the corpses of soldiers, as well as many adventurers. Ever since Lin Tian wiped out 300 adventurers, a few more had trickled into Bright Town. Little did they expect to encounter this disaster. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, Felaman hurriedly shouted, "Retreat! Cavalry, take as many civilians as you can and retreat." At this moment, he deeply realized his failure. Underestimating the goblins had led to this outcome. As they fled, Brutal certainly wouldn't let them go. Pursue. Don't let them escape. He still hadn't retrieved the magic ring. Otherwise, this trip would be in vain. In the sky, watching the two groups leave, Lin Tian couldn't help but show a sinister, satisfied smile. Because below were countless corpses. Goblins, soldiers, adventurers. Almost 1,000 in total. He quickly flew back and ordered, 100 of you, grab some sacks and follow me, be quick about it. Thus, Gobu Kwang and the others, carrying sacks, began frantically collecting bodies. No matter big or small, tall or short, fat or thin. All were stuffed into the sacks. Most of the dead bodies were small goblins, generally around levels 10 to 20, but it was better than nothing. There were also several hundred human soldiers and big variant goblins. At levels 30 to 40, they provided relatively more experience. After packing all the bodies, they retreated, leaving the remaining 200 big variants and some hero variants to stay behind and finish the cleanup. Lin Tian, riding a flying dragon, went ahead to see the current situation. Not long after flying, he saw Brutal and the others already engaged in battle with the human army again. But the humans were fighting while retreating. It seemed they would be wiped out sooner or later. Brutal's strength had become too overwhelming, capable of withstanding thousands of troops, slaughtering them single-handedly. Felaman's eyes were filled with anger, but no fear. These damned beasts. Your Majesty, if only you had given me 1,000 more soldiers. He hadn't expected to suffer defeat within the Lionheart Empire's territory. He felt deeply ashamed of his title as Count. Brutal, killing one soldier after another, moved towards Felaman. At this moment, Lin Tian frowned, astonished, as he looked at a mountain road about 10 kilometers away. Several different lights were approaching rapidly. They were moving too fast, beyond what any human or creature could achieve. Extremely conspicuous in the dark night. Damn, could it be that guy? Lin Tian muttered, worried it might be the sword Saintess returning, possibly with her former comrades, as Goblin Slayer had mentioned. At this moment, Brutal, covered in blood but with none of it his own, had already reached Felaman. Glaring at him, it demanded, hand over the magic ring, and I'll give you a quick death. Magic ring. I don't have what you're looking for. If you want to kill me, then kill me. You lowly beasts are not worthy of negotiating with me. Felaman replied firmly, gripping his sword, ready for a fight to the death. Even knowing he couldn't win, even having had opportunities to escape. But as a former knight, he couldn't allow himself to do so. Hearing this, Brutal didn't rush to kill him but instead snatched his sword and crushed it into a ball. Furiously, it roared, give me my magic ring. Thick, foul-smelling saliva sprayed all over Felaman's face. Felaman was somewhat bewildered, his face righteous. I really don't know about any magic ring. Are you serious? Chapter 54. The hunter team arrives. The sword Saintess was deceived. It's impossible. This makes no sense. Come here. Brutal was also bewildered and angrily shouted at the beast goblin in the distance. Grabbing him by the neck, he harshly demanded, what do you mean? Wasn't the ring taken by him? It was him, the boss. No mistake about it. The beast goblin answered painfully. However, Looking at Felaman, it seemed he wasn't lying. Brutal was so enraged that he ground his teeth and snapped the beast goblin's neck. He prepared to kill everyone and search them one by one. Felaman's heart pounded wildly. He knew the day had come. He slowly closed his eyes. Whoosh! A piercing sound suddenly exploded in the air. An arrow wrapped in white light shot from the treetops in the distance. It forced Brutal back several steps, leaving scars on his crocodile scale armor, and a few drops of blood seeped out. Seeing this, Brutal's cold eyes looked towards the distance, where a white-clad figure holding a bow stood. Opening his mouth wide, he roared angrily, "Who?" But suddenly, he felt a chill on his head, and the feeling of death rushed at him. He quickly dodged to the side. Boom! A platinum holy sword heavily struck the ground where he had been, followed by a slim figure in platinum armor. The sword Saintess, Alicenia. She slowly descended from the air, landing steadily with one foot on the sword's hilt. The moment she appeared, those soldiers who thought they were doomed were so excited they almost cried. Because she represented the word security. As for the incident in Bright Town, it was purely an accident, everyone understood that. Besides, no one would deny the strength of someone who had won 999 times for one failure. Brutal looked at the woman with confusion and shock. His biological instincts told him, danger. Extreme danger. A threat to his life. Before he could react, he felt something emerging from beneath his feet. He could sense a faint vibration. Swish. A long spear pierced through Brutal's foot, and he endured the severe pain to pull away with difficulty. A man with a buzz cut emerged from the ground, wearing tight black armor, holding a long spear still dripping with Brutal's blood. He looked about the same age as the sword Saintess, around 26 or 27. Seeing all this, Brutal's face became more and more twisted. He didn't know where these troublesome, threatening beings had come from. Do you really need to bully a goblin like this? Suddenly, a deep, magnetic voice sounded behind Brutal. Turning his head, he saw an elderly man in black leather armor carrying a shield and a sword, with short white hair and an eye patch. He looked at least 60 or 70 but still appeared robust and imposing. From his single eye, it was clear he didn't take Brutal seriously at all. It was full of disdain. Brutal couldn't hold back any longer and roared as he swung his fist fiercely at the old man. Seeing this, the old man took down his 1-meter wide sword, resembling a shield, to block. Boom! The impact of the tremendous force stirred up a strong gust. The old man stood still, just slightly surprised. What do young people eat these days to have such strength? Seeing his blow easily blocked, Brutal began to slowly seek an opportunity to retreat. He knew none of these people were easy to deal with. But just as he was about to escape the encirclement, an arrow grazed his head, nearly blinding him. At this moment, Felaman was overwhelmed with excitement. Lord Sword Saintess. You've finally arrived. And the members of the hunter team. He recognized them at once. They were legendary adventurers, former teammates of the Sword Saintess. In the distance, the archer named Emma wasn't human but an elf. She was granted citizenship in the Lionheart Empire and a legendary badge. The spearman named Marshall also had a legendary badge. The elderly man with the shield sword was a member of the Imperial family, with the blood of the Lionheart Imperial family. Named Austin, he had also earned his legendary badge 20 years ago. The others received theirs 5 or 6 years ago while teaming up with the Sword Saintess. Didn't expect the hunter team to come. I'm so lucky. Unfortunately, Count Standmont wasn't as lucky. Sigh. In his joy, Felaman also felt sorrow. The Sword Saintess said incredulously, they were just a group of big variants back then, and now, they've evolved to the Overlord level. Damn, girl, don't scare me. In less than a year, they went from big variant to Overlord. Spearman Marshall was taken aback. Before coming, he thought a group of mere goblins was no big deal. Hearing this, he found it hard to accept. It was unprecedented. Alicenia responded irritably. I said, call me Alice. All right, girl, let's get to work. Marshall chuckled and activated his skill again, super tier combat skill earth walking technique. He directly burrowed into the ground, ready to strike again. Brutal became cautious and watched the ground beneath his feet. But this time, Marshall emerged from behind, his spear glowing with a golden light as he charged up his attack. In that instant, Brutal abruptly turned and grabbed the spear, flinging Marshall away. Marshall rolled on the ground a few times, bitterly exclaiming, "Ah, I was careless, embarrassing myself in front of the girl." Brutal launched an attack, thrusting the seized spear towards Austin. However, It was once again blocked by Austin's shield sword. It wasn't over yet. Austin used a skill, Scorching Ashes. He spat a mouthful of burning ash, causing Brutal's eyes to sting and lose sight. Next, a sharp pain came from his chest, leaving a deep gash. He quickly retreated. Austin picked up the spear and tossed it back. Hold on to it, kid. If you can't even protect your weapon, how do you expect to protect Alice? Already feeling humiliated, Marshall felt even more ashamed. He recalled the embarrassing moments from their past team-ups. He had once pursued Alicenia and vowed to protect her in danger. In the end, he was the one who constantly needed protection. Stop it, Grandpa Austin. We haven't seen each other in a long time, give me some face. Marshall said tearfully. He then became serious. The two of them began to coordinate their attacks, with Emma shooting arrows from a distance to interfere. Brutal's previous arrogance and frenzy disappeared completely. Sweat constantly dripped from his forehead under the immense pressure. A single mistake could lead to injury or even death. Damn, especially that old man. His sword is too heavy. My skin armor can't withstand it. Brutal thought, trying to find an opportunity to escape. Unfortunately, he was so suppressed that he had no chance, and there was still an extremely dangerous woman who hadn't made a move yet. While he was contemplating, an arrow from a distance precisely hit his eye. Blood splattered. Suddenly blinded, he couldn't defend against the attacks anymore. Taking this opportunity, Austin and Marshall both launched a full-force strike. The spear pierced through Brutal's neck from the side, even emerging from the other side. The shield sword left a horrifying gash on his stomach, exposing his internal organs. Brutal screamed in pain, taking a deep breath. Roar. He used Beast King's roar again, but this time it was enhanced. The effect was the same. Austin and Marshall, being too close, were knocked unconscious by the terrifying sound waves. Alicenia had been waiting for this moment, which was why she hadn't attacked. She swung her holy sword, piercing Brutal's chest. Super tier sword skill star and moon slash. Boom. A scorching holy light exploded, creating a hole in Brutal's chest. One could even see the scenery behind through the hole. Brutal writhed in pain, grabbing a goblin and devouring it, activating a new innate skill. Brutal nature. By consuming his kin, he could undergo a high-efficiency healing process. The wounds began to heal at a speed visible to the naked eye. Austin and Marshall quickly recovered and moved aside. Watching him, Marshall couldn't help but exclaim, "This guy, pierced through the neck and chest, still won't die. After all, he's an overlord level. Now a finishing blow will kill him." Alicenia slowly walked over, ready to strike. Seeing this, Brutal was so frightened that he crawled back, filled with fear of this woman. He quickly pleaded, "Wait. I'm just here for the magic ring, I don't want to fight. I'll go back to the Great Tomb now, okay." The Great Tomb was another name for the largest enchanted forest to the west. It mainly housed a real tomb, where creatures feared across the continent lived. Hearing this, Alicenia couldn't help but ask, "Did you say, the Great Tomb?" Yes, I'm just here to retrieve my magic ring, I have no intention of fighting with you all. Blame him for taking my stuff. Brutal now behaved like a compliant child, trying to reason. Seeing him point at Philemon, Marshall asked, "Count, what magic ring of his?" "I really don't know. I swear on my knight's honor, I've never touched that thing." Philemon felt wronged, wondering when he had ever stolen something from a goblin. Being labeled as the bad guy. Hearing this, Brutal was genuinely baffled. The beast goblin had said it himself. Unfortunately, he had just killed him and couldn't ask now. But Alicenia sensed something was amiss. "It's him, it must be him. That extremely troublesome guy. Who? The goblin you mentioned earlier. Not this one in front of us?" Austin quickly asked. Alicenia thought for a moment and shook her head. "No, this guy says he's from the Great Tomb, looking for the magic ring, but he is a goblin living around here." The abduction of over 100 people from Bright Town indicated. It had to be the goblins living around here who did it. It's impossible to believe that someone came from hundreds or thousands of kilometers away from the Great Tomb just to capture 100 people. So, this guy was lured here from the Great Tomb by that one scheme, hoping we'd weaken each other. At this moment, everyone felt a chill run down their spine. Could a goblin really pull off such a scheme? Chapter 55. Interception of Brutal. T.L. Sungman. Everyone gasped in shock. This was even more terrifying than the most cunning enemy they had ever encountered. Because he disguised himself as weak and foolish, making everyone believe him completely. Brutal seemed to realize something and said, yes, that must be it. We have no grievances, so we'll just leave now. As he said this, he tried to get up and escape. But Austin stomped him back to the ground with a heavy foot. Alice, how do we deal with him? We should ask Count Philemon, Alicenia said calmly. Her eyes were full of caution towards Lin Tian, thinking of ways to eliminate him. She had no time to bother with Brutal. Philemon looked at Brutal on the ground and said coldly, do we even need to ask? A goblin must be killed. Besides, Count Stanmont died at his hands, as did that brave wandering hero. As he thought about it, he trembled with anger. The key issue was that he couldn't find Loder for Stanmont, meaning the entire Stanmont family had been gloriously sacrificed. That guy is dead too. Alicenia was slightly stunned. She still remembered the wandering hero. He was very weak but longed to become a legendary hero. But she quickly forgot about it. There were too many such people in this world. Philemon sighed. That guy was a hero. I could see that he was very cautious and careful, but he still chose to step forward at the critical moment. Enough. I'll handle this. Austin raised his shield sword, ready to decapitate Brutal from the neck. In the sky, Lin Tian signaled for everyone else to retreat back to the waterfall cave. He alone kept an eye on the situation. He didn't expect the group to arrive at this moment, disrupting his plans. He cursed. Damn it, all these corpses could have created an entire hero variant army. Then he charged up with wind element energy. 50 units of energy shot out in one strike, aimed at Alicenia and her group. Whoosh. The moment the sound of breaking through the air rang out, Alicenia looked up and locked onto Lin Tian in the sky. Her eyes were like a sniper rifle in the dark. The person being locked on instantly felt a strong sense of suffocation. Lin Tian immediately started to flee. But he didn't head towards the waterfall cave, as that could expose their base. Instead, he went towards Dragon Island, where the sea would make it harder for them to chase him. Just as the wind element attack landed, it stirred up a massive tornado. Swish, swish, swish. Sand and leaves flew everywhere. In the sudden chaos, many people couldn't stand steady and were swept into the sky. Austin and his group could only barely stand their ground. A slight slip, and they would be sent flying. Taking advantage of this, Brutal endured the side effect of his throat bleeding and used his roar skill again. This stunned Austin and the others in place. He then started running madly. His muscles tightened, veins bulging. Due to his size, the hurricane didn't affect him much. In the distance, Emma couldn't attack because of the hurricane, and Alicenia, the only one able to fight, chose not to. She kept her eyes on Lin Tian flying away in the sky. I won't let you escape. Alicenia's beautiful face was filled with determination. She lightly jumped and was blown into the sky by the hurricane, using its force to rise. She finally saw Lin Tian clearly. Slightly shocked, she thought, how is this possible? It's actually a small goblin. But seeing he could ride a dragon, he was definitely not an ordinary small goblin. She quickly activated her skill, Iron Gale. Sword chi surged, forming substantial attacks that slashed towards Lin Tian dozens of meters away. The hurricane didn't affect it at all. Damn. Lin Tian hurriedly controlled the dragon Xiao Huan to dodge. The impact from the sword chi almost knocked Xiao Huan down. The sword chi, like two giant blades, fell towards the forest below. Boom, boom, boom. It caused an earth-shattering explosion. If hit, it would be hard to survive. Just as Lin Tian was relieved to have escaped, he noticed a white figure chasing him relentlessly below. It was Alicenia, who said coldly, no matter where you run, I won't let you go. I will personally kill you. She finally stopped chasing when they reached the sea. But her voice wasn't a threat, it was a vow. Lin Tian gulped. This crazy woman is insanely strong. Just wait, I'll deal with you later. However, he knew he was in trouble. A sword Saintess was already hard to deal with, and now there were several more powerful opponents. Austin, Marshall, and Emma all had a combat power of around 2,500. About the same as Lin Tian's current level. After flying for a while, they circled back, intending to intercept the fleeing Brutal goblin on the road. Over at Philemon's side, after the hurricane dissipated, the remaining goblins were all killed. Out of 1,800 elite soldiers, only 800 were left, more than half were lost. Half of those losses were caused by Brutal alone. Alicenia returned and said, unfortunately, that guy can ride a dragon. I couldn't catch up to him. But there's something you all need to know. A goblin that can ride a dragon. What is it? Marshall asked in disbelief. Even among humans, it was rare to be able to ride a dragon. After all, dragons were dominant predators of the sky, ferocious and powerful. Alicenia explained, that goblin looks no different from a small goblin. Do not be deceived by appearances. What? A small goblin? Is it a mutant variant? No, that can't be right. Marshall and the others were stunned. Austin, who had been around for a long time, had never heard of such a thing. So, that guy is highly intelligent, huh? No wonder even you got tricked. Indeed, we were fooled the moment we arrived, Marshall admitted, feeling embarrassed as he had previously mocked Alicenia. Then, the group prepared to return to Bright Town for a rest. When Philemon saw the vanished corpses, he realized that guy wanted to see us both severely injured so he could take the bodies. Everyone knew the basic capabilities of goblins. The more they thought about it, the more fearful they felt. Neither group was foolish. One was led by a former Imperial Knight commander, now a count. The other was brutal, a monster from the Great Tomb. Yet, they were played like pawns. Philemon suddenly remembered, right, that Overlord Goblin mentioned a magic ring, which is likely in that guy's possession. Be cautious next time. Next time we meet, I'll personally kill him, Alicenia interrupted. The group began to rest and recover. The army was heavily damaged, even Austin and Marshall had internal injuries from Brutal's roars. They wouldn't be able to hunt Lin Tian for a while. On the road to the Great Tomb Forest, Brutal couldn't care about his injuries and ran mindlessly. Passing by the waterfall cave, he stopped. Doesn't matter, I'll hide there first. It'll be bad if those guys catch up. The goblin sentries from the Tien Quang tribe guarding the waterfall cave felt a shiver of fear and looked ahead warily. That terrifying aura, a primal fear. They immediately ran back, disregarding everything else. Outside the cave, Brutal's eyes flashed with surprise as he sniffed other goblins inside. Wait, that damned guy tricked me. He realized at that moment. He had been deceived by a beast goblin, and the magic ring was surely inside the cave. However, he hadn't anticipated that his large size would prevent him from entering. Damn it! Come out, you guys inside! Brutal roared furiously. But no one responded. Lin Tian had previously instructed them not to expose themselves or go outside. So they wouldn't respond. At this moment, Brutal sensed someone approaching from behind. He jumped out of the waterfall and saw Lin Tian riding a dragon. It's you. Hand over the magic ring. Brutal snarled menacingly, advancing step by step. In the next second, a blast of dragon flame shot towards him. The scorching flames blinded him, but didn't cause any real damage. Taking this opportunity, Lin Tian launched a poison element attack with 50 units of energy at him. Roar. Brutal leapt and flipped the dragon to the ground. He saw Lin Tian's true appearance. Full of disbelief, he exclaimed, a low-level creature. No, what are you? Hand over the magic ring. Are you talking about this? Lin Tian got up, dusted himself off, and held out his hand, revealing the ring that emitted a green glow. Immediately, Brutal seemed invigorated. Give it to me. He charged wildly. Like an enraged gorilla, each punch shattered the ground. Just as he raised his fists to smash Lin Tian suddenly vanished. Thanks to this body, I'm faster than you. Lin Tian had already circled behind Brutal, holding a fine dagger. Brutal turned quickly but saw nothing. Just grass, a nearby river, and pebbles. He spun again, but still saw nothing. Turning back and forth, his face filled with fear. Where are you? I've been here all along. Lin Tian's eerie, evil laugh sounded in his ears. Swish. A cold light flashed as Lin Tian cut off Brutal's ears. He immediately stuffed them into his mouth. Ding. Acquired super tier skill. Brutal roar. Brutal, in extreme pain and anger, reached out to grab Lin Tian, but couldn't touch him. Despite his long arms, his body was also long. At this moment, Lin Tian crawled to his other ear and used the newly acquired skill. Taking a deep breath. Roar. He let out a roar akin to a tiger's growl or a dragon's roar. Almost instantly, blood spurted from Brutal's ears. Followed by his mouth, nose, and eyes. His eyes rolled back, and he seemed to lose consciousness, standing dazed. He experienced the effect of his own innate skill. Even Lin Tian was amazed. I took a chance, and it actually worked. This was why he cut off his ears and ate them immediately. Chapter 56. Exchange for a new skill. Life's Miracle. TL. Sungman. Taking advantage of the time while he was unconscious, Lin Tian immediately blinded his eyes. It was only for a moment, and Brutal woke up. But he found his eyes were blind, unable to see anything. He roared in heart-wrenching pain. Damn it. What did you do? While shouting, he swung his fists wildly in an attempt to attack. Lin Tian was forced to the side, preparing to use the elemental hand crossbow to drain him until the paralyzing toxin took effect. But he underestimated the strength of an overlord variant. Brutal sniffed the air forcefully, a cold smile curling at the corners of his mouth. Found you. He charged forward like a starving tiger pouncing on its prey. Lin Tian hadn't even reacted before he was sent flying by a punch. However, it didn't cause too much damage. Brutal, now without sight, could only strike randomly, unable to make precise lethal attacks. But his continuous attacks were still a headache. Lin Tian hadn't even gotten up yet when a fist larger than his entire body came crashing down. He struggled to block with both hands. In terms of strength, he was no match for this guy, but fortunately, Brutal was injured, and his strength had significantly weakened after fighting with Alicenia and the others for so long. Overall, he only had a strength of 2,700, slightly higher than Lin Tian. Brutal found it hard to believe, you can withstand my attack. Impossible. In his astonishment, he felt Lin Tian's strength growing even stronger. He was even surpassing him. With a stumble, Brutal fell to the ground. Lin Tian frowned, why aren't you down yet? If I didn't need you alive, I would have stabbed your heart already. There was no food here to replenish his health. A hit to a vital point would be fatal. Impossible. I can't lose to A. Brutal muttered on the ground, realizing his body was starting to become immobile. Suddenly, he remembered the initial sharp pain. He thought it was from the dragon flame, but it was definitely something else. But now he realized it was too late. Then, Lin Tian called out to Goblin Slayer in the cave, it's your turn. What are you planning now? Aren't you going to seal his soul into the ring to increase your strength? Goblin Slayer asked in confusion. After all, the plan had succeeded, but not fully reclaiming the corpse was a pity. Lin Tian sneered coldly, I would like to, but the plan changed when so many strong opponents suddenly appeared. I had no choice. So what do you intend to do? Goblin Slayer couldn't help but ask. Lin Tian thought for a moment before confirming, isn't this guy from the Great Tomb? Why not use his background to have the people from the Great Tomb eliminate those guys? Isn't that too dangerous? The guys in the Great Tomb are best left unentangled. Even Goblin Slayer felt worried. She was confident in dealing with goblins, but like everyone else, she kept his distance upon hearing about the Great Tomb. Lin Tian believed this was the best solution. Then, he took off the magic ring on his hand and placed it in Brutal's hand. Just order him to report to the people of the Great Tomb and offer the magic ring, asking them to avenge Brutal. Hearing this, Goblin Slayer had no choice. She had to do as Lin Tian instructed. Overlord variants, even with royal blood, required a lot to be fully controlled. After all, they were just one tier away from the king variant. Then, she cut his wrist, dripping blood into Brutal's mouth. The gene's ability began to take effect. Gradually, Brutal started to lose consciousness. When he opened his eyes and stood up, he knelt directly at Goblin Slayer's feet, King. Goblin Slayer conveyed Lin Tian's orders to him. Brutal looked at the ring in his hand and nodded, I will complete the king's command. Without any delay, he headed towards the Great Tomb Forest. Lin Tian cleaned up the battlefield and then hid in the cave. He could only hope that Brutal would complete the task quickly. From the previous encounter with Marshall, it was clear he had the ability to burrow into the earth. Finding the cave location was incredibly convenient and quick. He really didn't want to move, so he hoped Brutal would quickly seek help. Returning to the cave, he smelled a delicious scent of blood. If he were still human, he would have vomited by now. But now it smelled extremely appetizing. Boss, you're here. I'm starving. Gobu Kwang couldn't wait to say, his stomach growling. Lin Tian replied irritably, you greedy thing, can't you eat something else to tide you over? Gobu Kwang looked aggrieved. At this moment, Gobu Yu spoke up for him. Boss, Gobu Kwang carried 4 bags back by himself, more than anyone else. Gobu Kwang was in the corner counting on his fingers. 1, 2, 3. Lin Tian felt a wave of helplessness and finally said, stop counting already. Do you think you can count with your 4 hands? It's time to eat. Hearing it was mealtime, Gobu Kwang was happy like a 2-meter-tall baby. After devouring all the experience packs they had gathered, Lin Tian checked the system. He had accumulated 300 life points. It was time to enhance his strength. He entered the system store and went to the skills section. Previously, he had wanted to exchange for Evil God's Blessing, which could summon a 6th-tier magic puppet to protect him. After much thought, Lin Tian reconsidered, 6th tier, similar in strength to Brutal, but even 3 Brutals might not be able to defeat the sword Saintess. He then browsed other skills. Previously, when his strength was very weak, he leaned towards skills that didn't require action but ensured his survival. Now, he needed something to substantially improve himself. After much selection in the 300 points category, he finally chose 3 skills. Abnormal fusion. Can seize and fuse the parts of others with oneself. Each part provides a certain attribute boost but does not grant the opponent's innate skills and does not affect one's own form. Necromantic Pact. Form a pact with any deceased soul, gaining all of their skills. Only one soul can be contracted at a time. Blood of Ruin. Attacks carry a ruinous effect, nullifying the opponent's divine abilities, weakening all their attributes, and increasing the damage dealt to those with the ruin effect. Lin Tian wanted all of these skills. Firstly, abnormal fusion didn't seem that strong, but combined with his gene devour ability, it became much more powerful. For example, fusing a dragon's wings and then devouring its flying skills would make him fly faster than a real dragon. Or fusing Medusa's eyes and then devouring her petrification skills, which would grant him Medusa's gaze. These 2 skills were indispensable. Without Medusa's gaze, he couldn't devour the petrification skills. The Goblin's gene devour had many limitations. To devour skills, certain conditions had to be met. Otherwise, it would be too overpowering. Why else would they be among the lowest level monsters? Fusing a dragon's heart would grant him burning blood, allowing him to release dragon flame skills. Necromantic Pact also seems very good. Lin Tian hesitated as he looked at the system store. If he could dig up the grave of the previous sword Saintess or some former legendary figure and forcibly contract them, it would be very satisfying. But it had its drawbacks. If there was a grave without a soul, it would be a wasted effort. Finding a desirable soul was a challenge. Lastly, Blood of Ruin would be a must-have, if not now, then next time. It was the only way to counter divine attacks. This way, nothing would be able to restrain him. After thinking for a long time, he decided to exchange for Blood of Ruin first, to have a fighting chance against the sword Saintess. Abnormal fusion was undoubtedly excellent, even better in some ways. But right now, there was nothing to fuse with. Ding! Successfully exchanged for Blood of Ruin. Congratulations to the host for achieving the miracle of life effect. Returning 300 life points. The sudden voice in his mind made Lin Tian freeze. Seeing that he still had 300 life points, he couldn't help but feel ecstatic. System, I love you. If you were a person, if you were a woman, I would never treat you badly. Lin Tian said, his hands trembling with excitement. He exchanged for abnormal fusion again. 2 wishes fulfilled at once. At this moment, Weiju and the others looked at him in surprise, not knowing what he was so happy about. Boss, what's wrong with you? Do you want that? As the saying goes, being well fed brings lustful thoughts. They thought Lin Tian had those thoughts. Pulled back by their voices, Lin Tian coughed. Nothing, can't you all behave for a day? My body can't take it. Just with Weiju alone, he had lost count of how many times it had happened. He guessed that the level cap had already reached the world's limit. Definitely more than level 100, maybe 200. However, considering his newly acquired abnormal fusion, if he fused his kidneys with those of a donkey or a horse. He recalled seeing a creature called the anglerfish, whose mating time could last up to 30 years. He couldn't imagine how powerful that would be. La la la. Weiju stuck out her little tongue and said nothing more. At this moment, he noticed Loader sobbing in a corner of the cave. Father, sister, I am sorry, I brought this upon you. Beside him was a broken sword and a spear. They were the weapons of Stantmont and Lorna. He knew them all too well. Gobu Tian had thought these weapons were pretty good and picked them up, which Loader saw. Lin Tian, is my father still alive? Loader wiped away his tears, speaking with guilt. Hearing this, Lin Tian, seeing Loader's miserable state, shook his head. Your father was bitten to death by an overlord variant, and as for your sister, her body has long been desecrated. Thud. Hearing this, Loader's heart skipped a beat. He felt worse than death. He had endured for so long, thinking he could still go home alive. Now, where would he go? Even if he escaped, there was no place to go. His home was gone. In agony, he said, I never should have provoked you, never should have tried to outsmart you. Lin Tian said nothing, resting on the ground. Ifreya, can you hear me? Loader turned to shout at her. Ifreya was lying peacefully beside Lin Tian. Hearing the shout, she looked up at him but said nothing. Loader began talking to himself again, as long as you can live, I hope the church will save you later. Farewell. Ah! Suddenly, he roared and ran headfirst into the stone wall. A sound of bones breaking was heard. Blood flowed from Loder's head, gushing uncontrollably. He had created a hole the size of an egg. But he wasn't dead yet. Loder lay on the ground, twitching, already unconscious. He was in a state between life and death. Seeing this, Lin Tian drew his short sword and ended his life. Consider this a reduction of your pain. This guy, after torturing you for so long, I've grown fond of you, but you suddenly couldn't take it anymore. Over time, his hatred for Loder had gradually faded. He had relaxed his control over him, only chaining him up. He didn't expect Loder to choose suicide. Chapter 57. Tier 7 Monster Minotaur Demon. TL. Sungman. Hi everyone, again sorry for the delays. Subsequently, the corpses were not wasted and were thoroughly consumed. With this wave, the number of hero variants grew from 20 to 40. Still far from reaching hundreds. HMPH, if you insist on obstructing me from reclaiming the corpses, don't blame me for exterminating you all, Lin Tian said with hatred in his eyes. This time, he absolutely wanted the sword Saintess to feel what a real blow was. In the Great Tomb Forest, Brutal, severely injured, finally returned to his Beast King tribe. Unfortunately, only a few small goblins remained. Brutal roared in anger for a long time. Then, he walked deeper into the forest. In this world's largest enchanted forest, humans were forbidden to step foot. Countless powerful monsters lived here. Tier 5 monsters roamed everywhere, and Tier 6 monsters were as numerous as dogs. Among them were 4 Tier 10 monsters, occupying the 4 corners of the forest. But they were also subordinates of the Great Tomb. Brutal ranked nowhere here, and he couldn't possibly enter the Great Tomb to meet the real monsters inside. Instead, he could only obediently find his superior, the Minotaur Demon tribe. Brutal carefully crossed the forest, even though he was afraid, because many powerful but extremely low intelligence monsters lived here. They were the truly ferocious ones that would kill any living thing in their sight. Before long, he arrived at a small mountain. The entire mountain had been hollowed out, where the Minotaur demons lived. Mr. Bull, I am the leader of the Beast King tribe, are you at home? Standing outside the cave, Brutal obediently asked, like a well-behaved child. He didn't dare to go in rashly, otherwise, he wouldn't know how he died. Boom, boom, boom. Inside the cave, a rumbling sound of the ground shaking echoed. Something enormous walked out. In the dark night, those 2 crimson eyes were positioned very high, at least 4 or 5 meters up. The figure was estimated to be twice as large as Brutal. In comparison, Brutal really was just like a baby. A gigantic monster with a bull's face and a human body finally emerged. It had huge horns on its head, its body was covered in bulging muscles, dense black fur, and it had a long tail. Its feet were in the shape of hooves, and its hands were similar to those of humans. Though bulls were said to be honest and kind, the Minotaur demons were known for their ferocity. They often went outside to slaughter humans and bring them back to eat. Goblins, comparatively, could eat other foods, with humans most appealing due to their excellent females. The meat wasn't actually that favored. But Minotaur demons were different. They had a generational habit of eating humans. They also had a nickname, cannibals. You evolved. The Minotaur demon showed slight surprise upon seeing Brutal, but soon regained his calm. Even if Brutal had evolved, he was still no match. Minotaur demons generally had tier 5 to 6 strength, but this Minotaur demon leader, Big Bull Li, was a tier 7 entity. Big Bull Li, LV80. Race: Minotaur demon. Profession: Berserker. Title: Tier 7 Monster, Cannibal. Health: 2300. Strength: 660. Defense: 700. Skills: Brute Force, Charging Horns, Demonization. Equipment: none. Overall: 3500. Although his overall strength was only 400 more than peak Brutal. Once crossing the threshold of 3000, every point of overall combat power became extremely difficult to increase, making the gap significant. Brutal honestly said, just evolved, but almost got killed by a group of humans. Humans, you left the Great Tomb. The Minotaur demon's eyes instantly focused as he asked. If someone of such strength was almost killed, the humans they provoked must be very strong. Brutal awkwardly nodded. Yes, but I went to retrieve something that belonged to me. They not only stole it but also killed my entire tribe. As he spoke, he took out the tier 7 Fatu magic ring. Seeing such a magical item, even the Minotaur demon was tempted. But he didn't expect Brutal to directly present it. This is a magical item made by the Ghoul tribe, part of your half-demon kin. If I give it to you, it can be considered returning it to its rightful owner. The Minotaur demon slightly smiled. HMPH, speak, what do you want? Help me, kill them. In an instant, Brutal's eyes were filled with sinister malice. Hearing this, the Minotaur demon thought for a moment, we have an agreement with the Holy Church, not to step foot in human territory. But I can apply to the Lord. If it's for revenge, he should agree. Wait here. After saying that, the Minotaur demon leapt dozens of meters away, quickly departing. In just a few minutes, he jumped back, his speed extremely fast and eerie. The Minotaur demon coldly smiled, licking his lips with a savoring expression. The Lord agreed. Finally, I can taste fresh blood and flesh again. Had it not been for the long time since he last ate humans, he wouldn't have wanted to do this. Moreover, the ring was also offered to the local lord. However, being able to reasonably go out to eat humans was enough. With a bull roar, dozens of Minotaur demons emerged from the cave. Their bodies were about the same size as Brutal's, with an overall power around 2,000. Their strength was already very formidable. I can't wait any longer, lead the way. Big Bull Li urged. In his eyes was a greedy and eager hunger for flesh. Ellipsis. In the Tian Quang tribe, Lin Tian had already mastered the proficiency of using the blood of ruin, and his level had been raised to 70. Lin Tian. LV 70. Race. Goblin. Profession. None. Title. Blasphemer. Potential god. God's blessing. Health. 2000. Strength. 540. Defense. 710. Skills. Abnormal fusion. Blood of ruin. Savage howl. Blade catch. Keen senses. Equipment. Excellent iron armor. Excellent short sword. Elemental hand crossbow. Overall. 3100. His strength had increased, but it was still difficult to reach the same level as the sword Saintess. Even if his overall power reached 4000, he might not be able to defeat her. Thus, Lin Tian always played dirty. It seems I have to join forces with Brutal to deal with her. Who asked to make my starting difficulty hell mode? Lin Tian said with a bitter smile. Who else faced a boss like the sword Saintess, capable of instantly killing him at the beginning? Otherwise, he would have swept through everything long ago, without needing to be so cautious. But now, he was finally on the verge of emerging victorious. As long as they wiped out Bright Town in this joint attack, they could form an entire army of hero variants. No more need to hide. At this moment, Goblin Slayer asked, do we need to go together later? No, I can escape when needed. This battle is mainly against the strong ones like the sword Saintess, Lin Tian replied. Having others there could lead to unnecessary casualties. He didn't even need to go personally, but he feared Brutal and his group might not be strong enough to take down the sword Saintess. He had to eliminate this thorn. A few days later, Brutal's voice echoed at the cave entrance. King, I am back. Just listen to him then, Goblin Slayer replied, and Lin Tian walked out next. Brutal looked at him and remembered the battle that day, but instead of being angry, he was very respectful. Let's go. This was the unchallengeable royal command. The moment Lin Tian stepped out, he saw dozens of huge, demonically imbued Minotaur demons. Those pairs of eyes sent chills down his spine. Big Bull Li asked in confusion, Brutal, the friend you mentioned is this low-level goblin. Is your brain broken or are my eyes failing? He had expected a Tier 7 Overlord Goblin. At worst, a Tier 6 one. Instead, it was less impressive than a pile of dog shit. Mr. Bull, rest assured, his strength is about the same as mine, Brutal said indifferently, continuing to lead the way. Since he said so, Big Bull Li asked no more questions. His mind was only filled with thoughts of eating humans. Following behind from a distance, Lin Tian couldn't help but remark, good heavens, he found a group of Minotaurs. Although he himself had done many Minotaur-like things, he didn't have any good feelings towards Minotaurs. This was the Minotaur law. Better I deceive everyone than let everyone deceive me. Overall, this group of Minotaurs was indeed very strong. Soon, they arrived at a small hill outside Bright Town, cautiously hiding. The soldiers were patrolling. Brutal pointed ahead, full of hatred, that's the place. But I must tell you, there's a notorious woman with a sword there, very fierce and strong. HMPH, I like strong food. Big Bull Li directly pushed the cautious Brutal aside and walked towards Bright Town. The group of Minotaur demons followed suit. They had no intention of hiding. In the distance, several patrolling soldiers were puzzled. What's going on? An earthquake? Look over there. Behind the hill. It's Minotaur demons. So many Minotaur demons are coming. Hearing the words Minotaur demon, the soldiers were scared and immediately ran. These infamous cannibals had harmed countless villages. Who didn't know? Thanks to the church, they were forced into the Great Tomb and dared not come out easily. Who would have thought they'd encounter so many here? Seeing this, Lin Tian secretly thought, are they really that scary? However, I think goblins are much more terrifying than any Minotaur demon. Although goblins weren't particularly strong now, only the high-tier intelligent ones were powerful. But if they captured Bright Town, Lin Tian planned to greatly develop low-level goblins. Establish a city. Use quantity to create a qualitative change. At this time, the Minotaur demons leapt from the hill. They landed heavily in Bright Town, crushing countless houses and buildings. Big Bull Li jumped directly into a tavern, crushing several soldiers still drinking. Seeing the sudden monster, the other soldiers sobered up instantly. They picked up their weapons and began to fight back. But in the next second, Big Bull Li grabbed one and stuffed him into his mouth, chewing him, iron armor and all. Good teeth were indeed a blessing. He began to feast right there. The other Minotaur demons did the same, their goal not being slaughter but simply to eat. Catching a person, they sat down comfortably and began to savor. Regardless of the soldiers attacking them, they focused on filling their bellies. Brutal also entered Bright Town, searching for the sword Saintess and others. At this moment, that familiar underground tremor was felt. He quickly retreated to the side. Marshall emerged with a long spear. Immediately after, Austin came out of a house, and Emma had already reached the highest bell tower. Swish! A sword chi slashed through, splitting a Minotaur demon in half. It saved the tavern owner. Frightened, he quickly escaped, gratefully shouting, "Sword Saintess." Alicenia also came out of her room, fully armored. Philemon quickly ordered, "All soldiers, don't panic. Gather around me." If they panicked, it would be a one-sided massacre. Soon, everyone distanced themselves from the Minotaur demons, while the residents and weaker adventurers fled the town. The Minotaur demons sat in place, savoring their tasty morsels. Chapter 58. Using a bow as a barret. TL. Sungman. Why are there so many Minotaurs? For the first time, Austin's expression turned serious. He felt an immense pressure. Marshall stared coldly at Brutal and said, "Isn't that guy from the Great Tomb? He must have summoned them. We should have killed him back then. This was my oversight last time. Leave it to me." Alicenia raised her longsword and charged directly at one of the Minotaurs. She was determined to make up for her previous mistake. She shouldn't have pursued Lin Tian. She failed to catch him and let Brutal escape, which led to the current Minotaur chaos. The Minotaur saw her rushing towards it and reached out to grab her, but in the next second, a flash of cold light. The large hand turned into a blood mist. Alicenia swiftly beheaded a Minotaur. Seeing this, Austin and the others also began their assault. Philemon commanded the soldiers to prepare a battle plan. The Minotaurs are too powerful. We need to use spears to entangle them. Brutal pounced and engaged Marshall. Austin, Philemon, and the soldiers began taking down the Minotaurs one by one. Emma targeted the weak spots of the Minotaurs, causing maximum damage. Overall, there were only about 30 of them. As long as nothing unexpected happened, they could be defeated without too many casualties. In a short time, Alicenia had already slain 4 or 5 Minotaurs. After eating 7 or 8 people, Big Bull Li's gaze was drawn to the sword Saintess, attracted by her strong figure and fair skin. She must taste the best. Lin Tian thought the same, though not about eating. Big Bull Li pushed aside several houses and charged at the sword Saintess. His massive body and unparalleled strength made him unstoppable. He launched a surprise punch at the sword Saintess's back. The fist was larger than a person. However, while slaying a Minotaur, Alicenia still had her left hand free, catching the punch with one hand. Evenly matched. Big Bull Li was dumbfounded for a moment. How is this possible? His greatest pride was his unrivaled strength, now caught by a human. Brute force. He activated a skill, exerting a second burst of power. The shockwave forced Alicenia to retreat, but it didn't cause significant damage. They began a fierce battle. On the other side, Brutal's overall strength hadn't fully recovered, and he was evenly matched with Marshall. Seeing this, Lin Tian started shooting from a distance, using poison elements. Marshall's left hand was paralyzed on the spot, unable to move. He exclaimed, "Someone else. A small goblin." No, It's him. Upon seeing Lin Tian, he immediately realized it was the goblin the sword Saintess had mentioned. However, a moment of distraction allowed Brutal to gain the upper hand. With his left hand paralyzed, Marshall couldn't wield his spear, a two-handed weapon. He hurriedly tried to use the earth movement technique to escape. Lin Tian sneered, "I've been waiting for this moment." He unleashed a charged earth element attack. A lump of clay engulfed Marshall, half his body buried, the other half above ground. The earth movement technique allowed movement through earth but could be interrupted by other skills. Any control type skill could do it. Brutal then prepared to crush Marshall's head with his jaws. Seeing this from afar, Emma began chanting, "Super tier archery, wind god's arrow." Her longbow gathered a force of swift wind. She fired instantly. She thought it would blow Brutal's head off. But the arrow was intercepted midair by another wind element. It was Lin Tian, an elf. Huh, good thing I also have sharp skills. Brutal bit down. Marshall didn't even have time to scream before he was killed. Lin Tian hurried over. "Wait, give this to me. You go help with the minotaurs." "Oh, okay." Brutal was taken aback but obediently agreed. The king's order couldn't be resisted. Seeing the nearly level 80 experience pack, Lin Tian didn't hesitate to devour it. Emma saw Marshall being devoured alive and covered her mouth in horror, kneeling on the ground. "Mr. Marshall." Tears flowed uncontrollably. "Marshall." Austin roared from a distance, veins bulging on his forehead. He charged forward, using his shield and sword to cleave a minotaur in half. He rushed towards Lin Tian. His overwhelming rage was terrifying. Seeing Austin's arrogance, Lin Tian stood his ground without moving. Austin, in a fury, shouted, "You damned beast. Super tier combat skill. Mountain cracking slash." The 100-pound shield sword swung down with immense force. Blade and aura erupted. This strike, even Big Bull Li couldn't take it. "Hey, why are you using your ultimate move right after meeting me? This isn't how the game is played." Lin Tian sneered and activated the skill, No Blade Capture. He completely nullified the physical attack. Unfortunately, he couldn't trigger the blade snatching effect since the weapon was almost as big as Lin Tian himself and very wide, making it awkward to hold. The sudden turn of events left Austin dumbfounded. He couldn't believe his attack was ineffective. It felt like he had struck the air. Just as he was about to turn around, he realized Lin Tian had disappeared. Like when he fought Brutal, Lin Tian had used the momentum to leap onto Austin's back, opening his seductive little mouth. Super tier magic skill. Brutal roar. An earth-shattering roar erupted. It shattered the surrounding debris, creating an open space. Austin didn't even have time to react. His brain turned to mush. This wasn't just a stun but instant death. White brain matter oozed from his nose and ears. Lin Tian started eating again. "If you're going to use your ultimate move, don't blame me for doing the same up close." Brutal's physical resilience was much better, and since Lin Tian had just learned this skill back then, its power wasn't significant. After roaring, his throat hurt for a long time. Now, after much practice, he could kill directly with it. "Lord Austin, how is this possible?" From a distance, Emma once again fell into despair. Two comrades, who lived and died together, had died right in front of her eyes. She even saw them being eaten alive. An ordinary person would have collapsed by now. Emma, suppressing her grief, her eyes glowing with a pure white light, activated the elf tribe's divine skill, Archer's Focus. It could maximize the accuracy and power of her weapon. It also had a certain X-ray effect. Lin Tian inexplicably felt a chill on his back and quickly hid behind some rubble, secretly pleased. "I didn't expect to level up by 5 levels, finally reaching level 75, and my overall strength also increased to 3,200. While he was thinking this, a sharp pain struck his back. He didn't know when, but he had been hit by an arrow. Lin Tian gritted his teeth and pulled out the arrow, only to see another arrow embedded in the stone wall in front of him. Fortunately, he dodged in time, or that arrow would have pierced his heart. He felt a lingering fear, as that woman using the bow like a Barrett. Damn, if not for the stone wall slowing it down, I wouldn't have been able to dodge. Brutal. Go and knock down the bell tower. Lin Tian quickly shouted. Luckily, he had that guy, otherwise, he would have been stuck here. Hearing this, Brutal charged towards the bell tower like a mad dog. Most of the buildings were made of wood. Under his frenzied attack, the bell tower began to sway. Eventually, it collapsed into rubble. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Lin Tian aimed his poison element attack at Emma. Swish, swish, swish. Unexpectedly, Emma, under the archer's focus, could easily dodge. With such an amazing skill, Lin Tian felt the pressure mounting. Unless her skill time ran out, he had no way to get close. Seeing this, Lin Tian had no choice but to find another pile of rubble to hide behind. Emma's anger had turned into an attack. Even hiding behind the thickest rubble was useless. In a few shots, the rubble would collapse, losing its cover. Suddenly, Lin Tian thought of something. No cover. Weren't the minotaurs right in front of him all covers? Just as he was about to jump onto their backs, he felt something was wrong. He quickly retreated. He saw the minotaur being directly pierced. But it wasn't killed. At this point, Emma's body could barely hold on. In the archer's focus state, the consumption of stamina, even draining her life, was immense. Each shot usually left her gasping for breath. Now, after shooting more than a dozen arrows, she almost completely exhausted her life force. But she still held on. She continued aiming, but her vision suddenly blurred, and the archer's focus forcibly interrupted. She collapsed to the ground in a daze. Seeing this, Brutal immediately wanted to pounce and tear her apart. But Lin Tian quickly called him off. Get out of the way, she's mine. Brutal could only obediently go help Big Bull Li. Lin Tian looked around and picked up Emma, carrying her towards the collapsed bell tower. Taking advantage of the fact that the sword Saintess hadn't noticed, he planned to enjoy himself. Not only was Emma very beautiful, but after mating, his attributes would also improve a bit. Soon, the unconscious Emma slowly opened her eyes, discovering her naked body beneath the goblin. She screamed in fright, trying to break free. But she found her limbs wouldn't obey. The goblin's, God's blessing, ability restricted her, not only preventing resistance but even making her cooperate. Get off, goblin. Stop moving. Get off, Emma said with tears in her eyes, but she was powerless to resist. Hearing this, Alicenia felt something was wrong from afar and, looking around, couldn't find Marshall or Austin. She quickly followed Emma's voice. At this moment, Big Bull Li had activated his demon form, increasing his strength to 3,900. His body was nearly 10 meters tall, with skin that seemed covered in a black shell, very tough. His legs had turned into huge tentacles, extremely difficult to deal with. He resembled the eight-tailed beast from a certain anime. That's why the sword Saintess was held up for so long. However, it was still easy for Alicenia to escape. She quickly jumped to the bell tower ruins. When she saw the scene before her, she was stunned. No, Emma, Alicenia immediately shouted. Emma held a dagger to her heart, tears streaming down her face. Alicenia, Marshall, and Lord Austin. They are already dead, and I. Chapter 59. Ultimate Skill Holy Judgment. T.L. Sungman. Seeing her disheveled clothes and the foul-smelling objects scattered on the ground, Alicenia understood. It was that goblin. The one they hadn't managed to kill. Splurt. While she was thinking, Emma directly plunged a knife into her own heart. Tears streaming down her face, she said, Lady Alicenia, I don't want to give birth to a goblin's child. You must avenge us. With that, she fell to the ground, dying with her eyes open. Alicenia's face darkened, almost dripping with anger. She was beyond furious. It was now hatred, malice, terror. From afar, Big Bull Li controlled 3 tentacles, smashing them towards her. Alicenia spun around. Sword chi slashed horizontally. Not only did it cut off the 3 tentacles, but the flying sword chi also severed everything in front of her over 3 meters high. Several minotaurs suddenly froze, half their bodies slowly sliding off and falling to the ground. Everyone was scared by the sudden scene. They couldn't help but step back several paces. Even the humans like Felaman. Big Bull Li also sensed that the situation wasn't good. Even if he activated his demonic transformation, he might not be able to win. For the Minotaur tribe, every demonic transformation cost them a tentacle. Big Bull Li originally had 10 tails, now he was down to 6, having used 4. If he lost all his tails, it would mean death. This time, transforming was risking his life. Seeing this, the other Minotaurs activated their demonic transformation. Most of them could only activate it 3 times in their lives, and they had to go all out this time, or they would all die. In the demonic transformation state, not only did their attributes increase explosively, but they could also use their tentacles for long-range attacks. A hard, armor-like substance would appear on their bodies, very tough. You all must die. Alicenia's face remained dark, coldly uttering these words. Ultimate sword skill Holy Judgment. She suddenly plunged her longsword into her own body. Everyone was stunned. Felaman, shocked and worried, exclaimed, Lady Sword Saintess, what are you doing? Alicenia replied indifferently, all of you, leave here immediately, or you will all die. Damn. Run. Run. I've never seen Lady Sword Saintess so terrifying. Mother, she's scarier than those monsters. A group of people started to flee. Hiding, Lin Tian also felt something was wrong and quickly fled as well. At this moment, the longsword plunged into Alicenia's body, burst out with a blinding light. Several tentacles near her were instantly evaporated by the light. Rumble. Rumble. Within the bright town area, the ground continued to shake. A giant golden magic circle covered the entire ground of Bright Town. Countless holy runes spun around. Alicenia slowly began to float upwards, then a golden statue emerged from the ground. About 10 meters high, it bore some resemblance to Alicenia. It even felt like a 110 replica. However, the statue's eyes were covered. The terrifyingly holy aura was so intense that no one dared to look directly at those eyes, even if they weren't covered. Alicenia's eyes were now emitting a strong golden light. She made a motion of reaching out to the right, and the statue mimicked her. But in the statue's hand, there was a giant sword formed of holy light. It was clear that Alicenia controlled the statue. Immediately, the statue began to move. The entire world seemed to tremble. With one strike, like squashing an ant, it obliterated a minotaur in demonic form. One was so scared he was stunned. The giant sword landed nearby, and the air wave it stirred up sent him flying. He quickly tried to escape. But when he reached the edge of the magic circle on the ground, the holy runes appeared, knocking him back. The damage was high too. His arm looked like it was burned, sizzling and smoking. Alicenia slaughtered wildly. No minotaur could withstand a single strike. Soon, only Big Bull Li was left. Outside, Lin Tian felt incredibly fortunate. Damn, luckily I ran out. This guy, the first thought was a swordsman, turns out to be a mage. A pure close combat mad dog mage. The destructive power of such a holy statue puppet was unimaginable. Checking through the system, Alicenia's overall combat power had soared to 5,000. 4,000 wasn't even her limit. Is it worth fighting like this, as if your lives depended on it? Lin Tian remarked, observing that earlier, both the elf and the minotaurs fought fiercely, and now even the sword Saintess was going all out. It was terrifying. On the other side, Philemon and the others watched this scene with tears of excitement. Lady Sword Saintess is so powerful. Do you understand what a sense of security is? This is it. Long live Lady Sword Saintess. I'm now a fan. I'm totally a super fan. My goddess is amazing. Kill that big monster. At this moment, Big Bull Li's face showed signs of fear. One of his horns had been cut off. His aura was weak, completely devoid of the arrogance he had earlier. The attacks from the holy statue grew increasingly stronger. Big Bull Li hurriedly used several tentacles to bind the statue's hands, feet, waist, and neck. A struggle for strength began. The muscles in the tentacles creaked under tension, and Alicenia, who was controlling the statue, also appeared to be struggling, unable to break free. It had to be said, no matter how powerful a woman was, she had no resistance against tentacles. Seeing this made Lin Tian want to learn this ability. The minotaur opened its huge mouth, revealing a tubular appendage hidden inside. It was very long, surrounded by sharp teeth, extremely frightening. It lunged towards the sword Saintess's body, like a chameleon or a frog extending its long tongue. Big Bull Li sneered, thinking he had succeeded, and so did everyone else. In an instant, the sword embedded in the sword Saintess's body flew out, piercing straight towards Big Bull Li's appendage. It directly pierced into Big Bull Li's mouth. Holy light spewed out from his mouth, like flames. It was shocking. Immediately after, the holy statue broke free from its restraints. It stabbed Big Bull Li's abdomen again, pinning him to the ground. It was clear that his strength was gone. Philemon and the others finally felt relieved, as expected of the undefeated sword Saintess, the unyielding holy sword protecting the empire, too powerful. Big Bull Li was completely suppressed, unable to resist. The holy sword inside him erupted with golden light, frantically destroying his internal organs. In addition to the sword pierced in his mouth. Finally, Big Bull Li gradually lost the ability to resist and died on the spot. At this moment, the holy statue staggered, almost losing its balance. Alicenia was also barely holding on, blood seeping from the sword wound in her abdomen, staining her platinum armor. As the statue disappeared, she fell from midair. Seeing this, Philemon and the others knew it was bad and rushed over to check on her. Alicenia stood up with eyes full of sorrow, not fainting, clutching her abdomen. Looking at Big Bull Lee's corpse, she felt no joy. 3 comrades who shared life and death were gone just like that. And the culprit was still alive. She picked up her weapon, used a recovery potion to suppress the wound, and prepared to find Lin Tian. Boom. A wind ball blasted towards the sword Saintess. Injured and exhausted, the sword Saintess couldn't react, flying dozens of meters away. Parts of her armor fell off, and her holy sword slipped from her hand. It's that goblin. You despicable, shameless creature, attacking Lady Sword Saintess while she's injured. Felaman shouted angrily. Lin Tian looked at him in surprise. What did you just call me? Despicable, shameless creature. Felaman said hatefully. Lin Tian shrugged. Not that, the previous sentence, you know I'm a goblin, and you're still reasoning with me. Swish. The elemental hand crossbow shot out. It hit Felaman right between the eyes, sticky blood oozing from the wound, and he fell to the ground. Lin Tian didn't bother arguing with him. But now, the plan to capture the leader first was no longer effective. The soldiers, morale shifted to the sword Saintess. Felaman's death made them furious. They all charged at Lin Tian with their weapons. There were over 300 soldiers, the most troublesome being the lancers. However, Lin Tian could handle it, moving swiftly among the soldiers. They couldn't catch his position. Every time he moved, a soldier would be decapitated, or have a bloody hole in his chest. Thanks to Lin Tian's small stature, his speed had great advantages. It was a one-sided slaughter. The ruins echoed with the soldiers' wails. Don't retreat. Buy time for Lady Sword Saintess to recover. Sacrifice your hearts. An experienced soldier shouted passionately. Suddenly, the shout stopped. He looked down to find Lin Tian standing in front of him, holding a heart. Well, you're free, I'll take this heart. Nearby, Alicenia struggled to move, healing her injuries. She felt anger, helplessness, despair, guilt. Watching her soldiers die for her, unable to help them. The painful wails were like a demon's whisper in her ear. Alicenia, regaining some strength, drank several vials of stamina potion. She picked up her holy sword and stood up. Her strength wasn't fully restored, only around 2,500. It's enough, I will kill you now. Alicenia moved instantly, slashing towards Lin Tian. Sword chi surged wildly. It was unavoidable. Lin Tian's keen skills sensed the attack. He quickly used a near-death soldier as a shield. Alicenia's heart tightened. She redirected her sword, slashing to the side. Boom. A 10-meter fissure appeared in front of her. The sight was terrifying. Chapter 60. Church Support, Holy Cross Guardian. TL. Sungman. Taking advantage of the sword Saintess's moment of recovery. Lin Tian raised his short sword, ready to stab her in the abdominal wound. Unexpectedly, she managed to perform a somersault, kicking Lin Tian away with one swift move. Fortunately, Lin Tian blocked with his short sword, only sliding a short distance from the impact. She was truly difficult to deal with, even though her strength had dropped to around 2,500. She was still so formidable. As they say, a starved camel is still bigger than a horse. Lin Tian quickly closed the distance again, and when he was close enough, he used the skill, Brutal Roar. The nearby soldiers were instantly shaken to death. The sword Saintess also faltered for a moment but then activated. The skill, Holy Sword Intent. Surrounding sword energy around her body suddenly dissipated, bringing her consciousness back. She hastily blocked Lin Tian's surprise attack. She even counterattacked, injuring Lin Tian with a reverse sword strike. Touching the wound on his head where the scalp had been scraped, Lin Tian realized that continuing like this might lead to mutual destruction, or worse, his defeat. After all, the sword Saintess was of the holy attribute, able to suppress him. His monster skills had minimal effect on her. At this moment, Alicenia's eyes burned with fury. Today, we shall end this. Lin Tian smirked coldly. Do you enjoy the taste of failure? Shut up. Alicenia swung her sword. Lin Tian calmly evaded, moving beside a soldier. The powerful and cold longsword stopped at the soldier's neck. The soldier was so scared that his legs gave out, trembling and kneeling on the ground. If you have the guts, stop running around. Stand still. Alicenia crazily swung her sword in pursuit. Lin Tian kept dodging, knowing he was faster than her, so there was no need to worry. He aimed to break Alicenia's spirit again, then he could use Blood of Ruin on her. Otherwise, she would block it. An hour passed. Lin Tian did not attack, just played around. He specifically hid behind the soldiers. Every time he was about to be cut, Alicenia had to stop, otherwise, she would kill the soldiers too. Many of them were crippled by Lin Tian, unable to escape. They could only become his human shields. Kill me, Sword Saintess. Kill me. Yes, just avenge us. Strike me down. The soldiers cried out in despair and fury. Under the influence of their voices, Alicenia froze, her resolve wavered. She hesitated. She had really thought about cutting them all down together. At this moment, the soldier held by Lin Tian pleaded, Sword Saintess, just take care of my wife and daughter, kill me. This is boring, let's call it a day. Anyway, you will end this battle in miserable defeat. Lin Tian spoke with a bored expression. Seeing him about to escape, Alicenia finally couldn't bear it. Closing her eyes, she slashed down in an instant. One sword. The soldier was split in half on the spot. But Lin Tian dodged just in time. A cold smile curled on his lips. He succeeded. If this continued, she would completely lose it. In just a few seconds, Alicenia had killed several soldiers in a row. She felt her eyes being covered in blood, the world turning crimson, with only one thought in her mind, kill. Kill them all. In a few minutes, all the soldiers were dead by her sword. Under the holy sword that protected the empire. Lin Tian laughed triumphantly. Well done, Sword Saintess. You're much better at killing people than monsters. Thump. Alicenia regained some clarity. Looking at the bloody scene before her, she was completely stunned. She couldn't believe she had done this. But looking down, the fresh blood on her holy sword was still warm, and she was covered in blood. I killed so many people I was supposed to protect. Alicenia's eyes trembled, questioning herself. This was the chance. Lin Tian wiped the blood from his head wound, smeared it on his short sword, and launched a sneak attack. Piercing through her armor, stabbing into her shoulder. Alicenia pushed Lin Tian away forcefully, screaming madly, I will kill you. Why are you doing this? Why did you kill them? For a moment, it was unclear if she was talking to herself or someone else. Just as she prepared to attack again, she felt a sharp pain in her shoulder. Under normal circumstances, with adrenaline, she shouldn't feel such intense pain, but it felt like her heart was being pierced. She fell to her knees. Directly, her strength rapidly waned. Moreover, she could feel the holy power within her ebbing away. Lord God, don't do this to me, it's not my fault, I will protect everyone, Alicenia stretched her hand towards the sky, pleading. She thought that God, seeing her slaughter her own people, had stripped her of her powers. With the sky covered in dark clouds, she believed even God did not want to look at her. Suddenly, Lin Tian appeared in front of her, landing a punch that sent her flying. She couldn't even hold onto her sword, which fell beside her. Alicenia did not resist, her heart filled with immense regret, but repentance was useless. Her comrades died before her eyes, and her people died by her hand. The overwhelming pressure made her head spin. At this moment, light rain began to fall. In endless pain and guilt, the severely injured Alicenia finally lost consciousness. Lin Tian looked at the perfect body before him and felt a pang of sympathy, such a strong woman, yet she has fatal weaknesses. Under the suppression of the blood of ruin, she wouldn't wake up for a while. Previously, Lin Tian had wanted to kill her directly and devour her. He definitely wanted to turn her into his plaything, but that was too difficult. She would probably commit suicide before letting that happen. But now, it might be possible. Under the pollution of the blood of ruin, the Sword Saintess would lose her holy power. If she believed she had been abandoned by God and chose to fall into corruption, he would have his chance. This is far from enough, so let's plant a seed of corruption in you, Lin Tian grinned wickedly. He tore off her platinum armor, a symbol of purity. When all the armor was removed, her snow-white skin, accompanied by a fragrant scent, was exposed to Lin Tian's gaze. Every inch seemed like a masterpiece of craftsmanship. Such a body was hard to find in the world. In the silent environment, with the gloomy weather. Gradually, the rain grew heavier, and as the white skin became stained with dirty mud. He believed a pure and noble soul would completely collapse along with the body's pollution. This feeling was something he had never experienced before. Compared to others, the Sword Saintess seemed to have something special. As Lin Tian was immersed in his thoughts, his heart suddenly felt a sharp pain. A sense of extreme danger quietly approached. In the distance, Brutal, who had escaped, came rushing back, his face full of fear, almost in tears. He hurriedly shouted to Lin Tian, the church. The people from the church are here. Run. Lin Tian asked in surprise, the church. Yes, it's the holy church. A bishop is here. Brutal didn't even care that Lin Tian had captured the Sword Saintess. He ran past him in a panic. Under the gray sky, Lin Tian saw a group of people slowly approaching from a distance, about a dozen, but it was hard to see clearly in the rain. At this moment, a sudden thunderclap roared. In the flash of lightning, Lin Tian finally saw the newcomers clearly. They were tall, all wearing heavy armor, and wielding heavy swords, walking step by step. The pattern on their armor was very striking. Full of oppressive force. A large cross symbol indicated the newcomers were the church's Holy Cross guardians. Lin Tian finished his last act, then distanced himself, confronting them. He didn't dare to act rashly. The bishop of the Holy Cross guardians looked at the sword Saintess on the ground and sighed. I didn't expect that even she would be in trouble, and it's just a small goblin. A weak and harmless appearance, hiding terrifying power and evil, this is a typical demon. The bishop said slowly, placing his heavy sword on the ground with a thud. He finally commanded, Holy guards, heed my command, in the name of God, offer your strength for peace in this world, expel the demon. Hallelujah. Suddenly, 10 holy guards charged at Lin Tian in unison. They looked heavy, but their speed was incredibly fast. The two sides clashed. Every strike, Lin Tian could barely block, realizing something was wrong. These guys were much stronger than expected. A quick glance at their attributes showed they all had a strength of 3,000. Terrified, he turned and ran. Slashing his palm, he scattered a lot of blood of ruin. The holy guards sensed something wrong with the blood, forbidden substance. Don't chase, that goblin is truly a demon. Lin Tian also fled in the opposite direction, then took a detour. Damn, this is the church's power. Even a small soldier has 3,000 combat strength, I need to revise my plan. He ran without looking back. He ran as far as he could. On the ruins of Bright Town, the bishop calmly walked to the sword Saintess. He tore off his red cloak and covered her, lifting her up. Let's prepare to return. This child needs the cleansing and guidance of the priest, otherwise, she might fall into corruption. Bishop, aren't we dealing with the goblin disaster? And this minotaur corpse, and divine priestess Ifreya, a holy guard asked. The bishop looked around, sighed, we're already late, bury the bodies. As for Ifreya, the archbishop has already said that God have descended a miracle and chosen a new divine priest. We don't need to search anymore. Hearing this, the holy guards understood. It was a pity, Ifreya had the best talent among the past divine priests. She could have possibly become a saintess. Then, they took the sword Saintess back to the capital. Originally, Philemon had requested their help in dealing with the goblins, but the church was short-handed, so they had come from far away. Chapter 61. Stepping into the Great Tomb. T.L. Sungman. After running for a long time, when Lin Tian realized they hadn't caught up, he thought he couldn't just keep running away. There were many experience packs there that hadn't been consumed yet. There were even large ones like the Minotaur. So, he quietly snuck back. When he was sure there was no one around Bright Town, he crawled out of the bushes. Where are the bodies? They actually buried them all. Lin Tian was puzzled for a moment, but then he understood when he saw many simple, nameless tombstones standing in the ruins. Fortunately, the Minotaur's body was still there. It seemed they weren't kind enough to bury the monsters as well. He feasted for a day and a night, almost devouring everything, including the 10-meter-tall Minotaur corpse. He ate until he was nauseous and finally reached level 80. Because goblins didn't have the ability to gain experience by killing enemies, they could only grow stronger by continuously devouring flesh through the skill Gene Devour. Fortunately, using the Gene Devour skill on corpses didn't cause a feeling of fullness. Otherwise, he would have already burst. The nausea came from eating for a very, very long time. He was almost exhausted. Damn, at least I'm level 80 now. Going back to train my overall strength should bring it close to 4,000. Dragging his weary body, Lin Tian could finally head back. Moreover, this time he had won a great victory. Not only did he eliminate the most troublesome opponent, but he also secured a long period of development and prospects for the Tian Kuang tribe. As for the future, when Lin Tian arrived outside the waterfall cave, he saw the so-called future. It was brutal. Through him, he could lead all the goblins into the Great Tomb for protection. They wouldn't have to fear human retribution anymore. Moreover, even people from the Holy Church wouldn't dare to enter casually. Lin Tian called out to him, Oi, what are you sneaking around at the entrance for? My tribe is gone now. I want to follow my king. Brutal spoke with a longing like a little baby. Lin Tian smiled lightly, wait here. I'll get her to agree. The main thing was he couldn't enter, so he had to wait here. When he entered the cave, everyone saw Lin Tian return and immediately asked, "How did it go? Did you win? Boss, tell me what happened. Oh my god, did you notice? The boss seems even stronger, and he feels really powerful." Gobu Yu, Goblin Slayer, Leah, and others were all very curious. Lin Tian couldn't help but feel a bit proud. "Don't you know my skills? The sword Saintess has been reshaped into my form." At this moment, everyone was in awe. The most surprised was Goblin Slayer, who said incredulously, "No way, you defeated her. Not only did you defeat her, but you also mated with her." "Of course, but unfortunately, the Holy Church took her away," Lin Tian said with some disappointment, reminiscing about the intense moments with the sword Saintess. The impact was so strong. It was unforgettable. That was a perfect body like never before. Suddenly, Goblin Slayer hugged Lin Tian tightly, rubbing their faces together. "I knew you were the best, a perfect specimen. Come on, I want it." "No, I don't want it today. Let me off, I'm too tired." Lin Tian quickly refused, jumping out of her embrace. Then he got to the main point. "You know the guy outside, right? He wants to join us. We can use his identity to move to the Great Tomb." "To the Great Tomb?" Goblin Slayer was a bit surprised but trusted Lin Tian's decision. "No problem." Then, Lin Tian gathered all the goblins and instructed, "Everyone, take a rest. Tomorrow we have big things to do. Long live the boss." "All right, I love doing big things. Let's do it." A group of goblins cheered, waving their arms and legs. Lin Tian lay in his nest, thinking about where to start with the big event tomorrow. Previously, riding on the little dragon, Huainan, he had mapped out the entire area, including the terrain, villages, rivers, and so on. The most important were the villages. Within a few hundred miles, there were more than 10 villages of various sizes, each with about 100 people. That's roughly over 1,000 people. Subtracting the elderly and children, there were only 200 or 300 women left, maybe more if they were lucky. It doesn't feel like enough. We'll have to plunder them all along the way, Lin Tian thought, since the Great Tomb had a non-aggression pact with the Holy Church. Before going to the Great Tomb, he needed to prepare enough breeding tools. In there, he would have enough time to build a large goblin tribe. The prerequisite was having enough breeding tools. Snatching a few hundred or even 1,000 was necessary, and the plan was to use humans to breed an elite force. As for low-level goblins, it was sufficient to use ordinary animals and monsters for mass production. That would definitely not be lacking. Previously, due to the need for secrecy and food shortages, only high-quality goblins were produced in small quantities, avoiding mass production of low-level goblins. In the Great Tomb, that wouldn't be necessary. Lin Tian could fully unleash his plans there. Ellipsis. The next day, the entire Tian Quang tribe was mobilized, taking out several hundred large hemp sacks woven by the elves. Each sack could easily hold 2 people. Lilith and the others turned into bats and hid in one sack to avoid sunlight. They also brought along the original 100 breeding machines. "King, you've come out. I want to." When Brutal saw Goblin Slayer, he quickly knelt down. Before he could finish his sentence, Goblin Slayer said casually, "No problem, but you must follow his commands completely, seeing him as you would see me." Then, Goblin Slayer walked towards the front of the main force, not even bothering to glance at Brutal. That was an Overlord variant. Just one step away from a King variant, not even worth looking at. Brutal nodded repeatedly. "Then I'll call you boss too." "Boss, what are we going to do?" "Go to your tribe and prepare for us to move over there. But before that, we need to raid some villages," Lin Tian said. Brutal was slightly stunned, then nodded repeatedly. "Great. Wonderful." Lin Tian whistled to summon the dragon Huainan, rode her, and led the way with a map in hand. He instructed, "Follow closely. Remember, we only capture women. If there are slightly older girls, they can be taken too, they can be used when they become adults. As for the men, kill those who resist. If they don't resist, do whatever you want with them. Of course, eat them, hee. Gobu Kwang licked his tongue and smiled. As for Gobu Shan, the corners of his mouth reached his ears, of course, something more enjoyable than eating. Soon, they saw small scattered houses at the foot of the distant mountain, with smoke curling up. The wheat in the fields was golden and ripe. It seemed this autumn was another harvest season. The residents of each household were probably eating, preparing to continue harvesting wheat after their meal. In the village, a man with a white cloth cap on his head was eating bread, with some wild vegetables and jam on the table. The man smiled and said, "My wife, how much wheat do you think we'll harvest this year? You look so happy. But honestly, it should be twice as much as last year. We'll have enough food every day, and Gru will grow up quickly." Beside him, a beautiful woman said with a smile, gently touching the little boy in front of the table who was eating bread. Amidst the family's laughter, suddenly, there was a loud bang. The wooden house wall was suddenly smashed open, and the whole house shook, seemingly about to collapse. Gobu Kwang was the first to rush in, grinning foolishly. "Caught them. Top quality breeding tools, hee. What kind of monster is this? Run." The man's expression changed drastically, quickly grabbing the bread knife beside him. But even with a weapon in hand, he felt no sense of safety. This small knife wouldn't even hurt them if he stabbed 100 times. Gobu Kwang grabbed the woman first, making her almost faint from fear. The child cried out, "Mom, let go of my mom. Gru, run." The man, furious, stabbed Gobu Kwang's thigh with the knife. Unfortunately, it only caused a superficial wound. Gobu Kwang felt a sting, angrily grabbed the man, and squeezed. Crack, crack, splat. The man's bones shattered, and he spat out a mouthful of blood, dying on the spot. The woman cried, "Husband! Husband! Gru, run and find the village chief to save your dad." When the child opened the door, he was completely stunned. In the village, flames raged, and a large group of goblins was slaughtering and looting. Women were being drugged and thrown into sacks like objects. Suddenly, Gru felt Gobu Kwang approaching from behind. He was so scared that he collapsed, crawling and crying, "Don't come near, don't come near," sob, sob. "Kid, you have to eat well to grow as tall as me." Gobu Kwang shoved bread into Gru's mouth as easily as picking up a grain of rice. Then he walked away. In less than an hour, the village was almost completely looted. Lin Tian didn't restrict them from killing people, as it would undermine his authority and cause them to lose themselves. He was no longer human but a bloodthirsty goblin who killed without hesitation. So, he used goblin methods to rule this tribe. Almost no one was left alive in the village, but some managed to escape. Their main goal was to capture women, not kill people. Lin Tian and his group walked on the road ahead, with the remnants of the village, now in flames and filled with cries, behind them. Let's go to the next one. Ellipsis. In a few days, they raided almost 10 villages, but the number they wanted was still far from enough. They had only captured about 230 women. Continue advancing under Brutal's lead. I'll scout ahead, Lin Tian said, riding the dragon to map out the villages along the way to the Great Tomb. After half a day, he was almost at the destination. Looking at the so-called Great Tomb, the enchanted forest, Lin Tian couldn't help but sigh. Is that the Great Tomb? Flying high in the sky, the horizon ahead was pitch black, even with the blazing noon sun. That enchanted forest, spanning nearly 10,000 kilometers, was full of unknown terrifying monsters. However, there were no villages nearby. Even with a contract with the church, people didn't dare to live too close to the Great Tomb. After all, some monsters were low in intelligence and wouldn't care about any contracts. Chapter 62. Plundering Operation. TL. Sungman. The total distance covered was 700 kilometers. There were 19 villages and 2 small towns. In rough estimates, capturing over 1,000 people was not a problem. With this many captives, one could not imagine how fast the breeding speed would be. Lin Tian immediately regrouped with the main force. There's a change in the route. All of you follow me, it's a bit of a detour. A detour was definitely less important than capturing breeding tools. At this point, they could act recklessly, without fear of threats. Ellipsis. 70 miles from Lin Tian and his group was the small town of Koselero. They had already heard news of goblins plundering along the way. It was the escaped villagers who came to inform them. The town mayor, Frank, immediately began organizing defenses. Gather all the adventurers and soldiers in the town. I have an announcement. Soon, several hundred people gathered in the town square. Although this town was not as large as Bright Town, the mayor, Frank, also doubled as an adventurer. He encouraged everyone to improve themselves and become adventurers. Not only could they protect themselves, but also their families and the town. Thus, there were many fighters, a total of 300. Mayor, isn't this a bit exaggerated? I've heard the news. Isn't it just a group of goblins? I've killed enough goblins to pile up into a mountain, ha ha ha. Are we, the people of Koselero, afraid of a group of goblins? When the goblins come, we'll kill them right at the town gate. Everyone in the square joked and bantered. They were not afraid of goblins, as the surrounding monsters had been eradicated. Many had even ventured near the Great Tomb. Overall, their levels were around 30, with few reaching 50. There was once a 70-plus level diamond grade adventurer from here. The town's name originated from this adventurer. However, he had long since moved to a big city to further his skills, so he wouldn't stay here. Seeing everyone's confidence, Frank felt slightly relieved. Prepare yourselves, they should be here soon. Just then, the villager who had warned them rushed out, his face full of terror. Don't be careless. Those goblins are terrifying. They seem larger than ordinary goblins. Oh, I know, they're just the big variant, no need to worry. Below, a level 50 young man said disdainfully. His name was Ace, and he was the strongest adventurer of this generation. Frank looked at him with satisfaction. Good, as expected of Ace, knowing about the big variants. Ace, feeling even more arrogant after this praise, said, just big variants, I can handle even hero variants. Then, Frank assigned a few people to patrol around the town as sentries. If anything happened, they could respond immediately. Ellipsis. At this moment, Lin Tian's group was still on the move. Looking at the mapped route, he said, ahead is a small town. Prepare the sacks. Finish quickly, then continue on. A massive force of several hundred big variants advanced towards Koselero. They're coming. Goblins are coming. A sentry on the east side of the town shouted as he ran. Hearing the alarm, the waiting adventurers and guards immediately gathered at a wheat field outside the town. The wheat had been harvested, leaving only yellow stalks and bundled straw. The sentry rushed past everyone, continuing to run without looking back. Frank was puzzled but did not ask further. Ace stood there with a longsword, looking extremely confident. Guys, let's see who kills the most goblins. The loser treats everyone to a month's worth of drinks, how about it? Forget it, we can't compete with you. You're too strong for us. Two people nearby said with annoyance. Hearing this, Ace smiled smugly, enjoying the attention. Not fun, I might as well handle them all myself. You guys can go rest, and then. Before he finished speaking, he sensed something was off. He felt the ground tremble slightly, and the source of the tremors was getting closer. When he looked towards the wheat field, the sight before him left everyone stunned. The first to appear was Gobu Kwang, massive in size, with muscles and 4 large arms that made people stop in their tracks. Next was Gobu Shan, covered in bone spikes. Then came a large group of extremely fast Gobu Tian and others. Their eyes couldn't keep up with their speed. Finally, a 3-meter-tall brute appeared. At that moment, everyone instinctively took a few steps back. They had never seen such terrifying goblins before, just looking at them made them feel unbeatable. Roar. Suddenly, a dragon's roar sounded, like thunder on a clear day. The residents, who were accustomed to their comfortable lives, stumbled in fear, with many unable to stand firm as their legs gave way. This was because it was their first time seeing a dragon. A real, flying dragon. Those who had drunkenly boasted about slaying a dragon were now so scared that their legs turned to jelly, needing to lean on others to stay upright. Why is there a dragon with the goblins? Damn it! Run! Where is that damn sentry? He only said goblins were coming, but didn't tell us they were these kinds of monsters. The crowd turned into a pack of frightened dogs, immediately turning tail and running. Ace, too, was so terrified that he was shaking all over. Wait for me. He staggered as he walked, looking like he might fall at any moment. Lin Tian, riding the dragon, was slightly surprised, so many people were already prepared. But it's useless. Attack. Because he didn't see these people as a threat, he hadn't made any advance battle plans. They could just charge in and sweep through. Being in a remote location, there were no official imperial troops or church members, and most adventurers were novices. Even if they encountered a legendary adventurer on a journey, they still had a chance to fight. In a word, they could act with impunity. The adventurers of Koselero town scattered like rats, fleeing in all directions. They couldn't even handle a single big variant. HMPH, what a bunch of bumpkins. They seemed so imposing at first, but now, they're more pitiful than mice. Lin Tian couldn't help but sneer. At first, seeing so many adventurers defending the town, he thought there might be an interesting fight. But once inside the town, it was a one-sided massacre. The defenders even forgot to fight back, focusing only on escaping. In less than 3 hours, the small town was thoroughly plundered. 200 women were captured, many of them adventurers with better attributes than ordinary women. Ace, who had been running around in panic, was hiding under a table in a small house. In front of him, Gobu Shan's cold, mocking footsteps approached. Hide well, here I come. Ace, trembling all over, saw Gobu Shan approaching and thought in terror, why are these goblins so terrifying? Are they even goblins? Can someone save me? Wow. Suddenly, Gobu Shan and Ace locked eyes, a chillingly close encounter. However, Gobu Shan was holding Mayor Frank's head under the table. Ace was so scared he nearly lost his soul, convulsing on the ground and foaming at the mouth. This is no fun. Boss, we found someone who looks quite capable. What should we do with him? Gobu Shan, disappointed and dragging Ace, threw him in front of Lin Tian. Lin Tian used the system to scan him and found he was at level 50, but his overall combat power was only around 700. Far below average. Comparable to a big variant of the Tian Kuang tribe. Lin Tian said, you guys can eat him. Rest up and prepare to move on. In the next 10 days. They plundered most of the marked villages along the route. However, some villages slipped through the net. Forewarned and aware of their capabilities, they packed up and fled together. Lin Tian even rode the dragon searching for them to no avail. When they reached the Great Tomb, the goblins were exhausted, having captured over 1,000 people. Not only was transportation a hassle, but finding food for them was also a chore. Lin Tian sighed, it looks like our workload will increase a lot in the future. Gobu Yu, Leah, Goblin Slayer, can you three handle it? Most of the tribe's work was assigned to them. And also Cassandra, and now another addition, Brute, who could also take on some tasks. Including daily gathering, equipment crafting, material storage, maintaining order, breeding and training new goblins, patrolling, and monitoring. Though they didn't personally get involved, they organized other goblins to help. But it was still quite troublesome. Gobu Yu grinned, boss, don't worry, we can handle it. Leah stretched, looking tired, as long as you satisfy me once a day, no amount of work will tire me out. Alright, that would be too exhausting for me. Lin Tian chuckled bitterly. He finally understood what it meant to go from one extreme to another. As they stepped into the Great Tomb, the previously bustling, cool breeze, warm sunlight, birds singing, and insects chirping all disappeared. Everything became quiet and eerie. So quiet that even their own breathing sounded harsh. The atmosphere was so daunting that even the monsters found it scary. Following the brute's guidance, they arrived at a small valley. Everything was unchanged from before. Scattered dense huts, decaying blackened trees, scattered campfires. And a dim sky. Only the goblins of the brute's tribe had been nearly wiped out. Boss, this is my Beast King tribe, now called the Tian Kuang tribe. The brute said respectfully, smiling foolishly. Lin Tian nodded, find a place to rest first. I'll scout the terrain. Then he rode the dragon, flying around the area. The terrain was not the main concern, but he couldn't help but exclaim, wow, really? Such a small area has so many monsters. I even saw several 5th tier ones. In just about 10 kilometers, he found hundreds of monsters. There were even 7 or 8 of the same tier as the dragon. The Great Tomb was truly terrifying, living up to its fearsome reputation. Chapter 63. The Sword Saintess Gives Birth, the Lion Emperor's Wrath. T.L. Sungman. Lin Tian then surveyed the topography of the valley. It was nestled between 2 mountain cliffs, essentially at the base of a precipice. The concealment was indeed quite good. The valley's area was relatively large, about 1 kilometer wide and approximately 3 kilometers long to the end of the mountains. It could easily accommodate 100,000 goblins. Furthermore, high cliffs on either side acted as natural safety walls, requiring only the front and back to be guarded. After planning out various areas, Lin Tian began to organize. Thousands of breeding tools were arranged in 3 batches within some crevice areas of the valley. These crevice areas were also vast, providing shelter from the wind and rain, while being hidden and safe. Then, he divided the living area, materials area, rest area, and so on, each clearly marked and notified. The rest, he left it to them to frantically reproduce. Ellipsis. Time flew by, and a month quickly passed. The events at Bright Town had spread nationwide, and Lin Tian's raids on villages and towns along the way were well known. The news even reached other empires. This caused the Lionheart Emperor to lose all face. For such a large empire to be thrown into chaos by a goblin was indeed a disgrace. In the largest cathedral in the capital, also the headquarters of the Lionheart Empire's holy church. It occupied a considerable area, with the central cathedral built entirely of white jade. A tall, sacred golden cross stood within, incredibly magnificent. Today was a very special day, and even the Lionheart Emperor, despite being troubled by the goblin situation, had to come personally. A middle-aged man in bronze gold armor, draped in a red cloak, quickly walked toward the center of the cathedral. His face was sharply defined, with a bit of stubble and scars, his eyes fierce like a lion's. No one dared to look directly at him. The golden, radiant crown on his head symbolized one thing. This nation, established amid a century of war and smoke. Their Lionheart Emperor, Charles II. As he approached the cathedral, he found it surrounded by many people. They were nuns, monks, and holy guards. All were holding a cross, softly reciting the Bible, seemingly praying for someone. Seeing this, Charles II did not interrupt but waited until someone finished reciting before asking, "How is Alice?" To the church, even a monarch showed great respect. The monk's face was grave. She started giving birth 10 minutes ago, she should be about to deliver. He was talking about the sword Saintess, Alicenia. After being taken away last time, she had been resting in the church, but unfortunately, she could not escape the fate of being seated. Hearing this, Charles II's teeth almost shattered from clenching. His whole body trembled, his fists cracking loudly. Lin. Charles II spat out each word with hatred, his terrifying aura scaring everyone around. To Alicenia, Charles II was like a father. He also regarded Alicenia as his daughter. Now, her husband had become a goblin, and a forced one at that. Who could tolerate this? Inside the tall white jade cathedral, a group of nuns and the current Holy Mother were busy. Under the statue of Jesus, a pale figure lay on the carpet. It was Alicenia, groaning in pain, drenched in sweat, her golden hair soaked. "It hurts. Why does it hurt so much? Child, this is your first childbirth. It will definitely hurt. Keep going." The Holy Mother spoke gently, her eyes full of sympathy, almost in tears. Although the name Holy Mother sounded old, she looked only around 30. Wearing a white robe with golden trim, she appeared pure and flawless, yet her full figure added a hint of seduction. Her gentle eyes made people want to lie in her arms and sleep peacefully. The Holy Mother was the highest authority over all nuns, second only to the Pope. She had a high status and was respected by many. At this moment, Alicenia felt she was about to faint from the pain, but in the last second, she felt something coming out. In that instant, she collapsed on the spot, panting heavily. Not only because it was her first childbirth, but also because her first time was with Lin Tian. Not having been stimulated multiple times, she was not spacious enough. When the sticky, green-skinned goblin was born, the nuns covered their mouths. They were so frightened they stepped back several paces. They could not believe this was the child of the sword Saintess. Seeing this, the Holy Mother steeled her heart, intending to take the goblin away. Slap. Suddenly, she felt a tremendous force on her wrist. The exhausted sword Saintess grabbed her hand, and coldly said, "Don't touch him." The Holy Mother was not frightened by the goblin, but by the sword Saintess's current state, feeling the killing intent in her eyes. They quickly and tactfully stepped back. The small goblin chirped and, unable to speak yet, managed to utter the sound, "Mama," after a while. It even struggled to crawl towards the chest of the sword Saintess. Alicenia slowly sat up, staring blankly at the tiny monster she had given birth to. The goblin infant, with its mouth full of sharp teeth, latched onto the feeding spot and began to suckle. However, Alicenia, experiencing breastfeeding for the first time, felt a sharp pain. She quickly retreated a few steps, panic-stricken, and asked, "What is he doing? This little one seems hungry." Imagine that, just born and already able to talk, and it knows where to find milk. The Holy Mother spoke with a face full of lingering fear. Such a creature was truly inhuman. Hearing this, Alicenia cautiously held the baby in her hands, and despite her embarrassment, placed it on her chest. Watching this strange scene, one she had never experienced or understood, she was stunned for a long time. Suddenly, she let out a silly laugh. "Look at this little guy, he must be starving." Seeing her reaction, the nuns were at a loss, feeling inexplicably sympathetic and pitiful. The Holy Mother took out a robe and draped it over Alicenia. Then she walked outside. Seeing her come out, Charles II hurriedly approached and asked, "How is she? Is she all right? Your Majesty, she has given birth safely, but you should see for yourself." The Holy Mother was momentarily at a loss for words. She had originally planned to take the goblin infant away while the sword Saintess was weak and have someone else deal with it. Unexpectedly, Alicenia still had strength left. Charles II rushed inside, and when his concerned gaze fell upon the scene of the sword Saintess breastfeeding, he stood there as if struck by lightning. Stunned in place, he did not recover for a long time. Various emotions flickered in his eyes as he feigned calmness and said, Alicenia, may I see your child? Your Majesty, he is still nursing. You can just look. Alicenia did not look at the Lionheart Emperor. Her eyes remained fixed on the goblin. Seeing her like this, Charles II felt he was on the verge of collapse. The sword Saintess, the holy sword that protected the empire, not only gave birth to a goblin but also treated the goblin as her beloved child. He had imagined several possibilities. First, after giving birth, Alicenia would decisively kill the child. Second, she might avoid it, letting someone take the goblin infant away. Third, she would be terrified. But he had never thought she would treat the goblin as her child. Finally, Charles II could no longer endure it, his face darkened. Give me that goblin infant. This is an order from the Emperor. Chapter 64. The Monster Lord, the Cannibal Eagle. T.L. Sungman. He couldn't accept that the dignified sword Saintess was raising a goblin as a child. It wasn't just him. The church, the nobles, and the entire empire couldn't accept it either. However, this time, Alicenia didn't obey any imperial decree and completely ignored Charles II. This attitude made Charles II both angry and helpless. Alice, my child, I watched you grow up. I personally bestowed the holy sword upon you. I am still the king of this country. Do you not even listen to me anymore? Your Majesty, Alice would never dare to disobey your orders, but this is the will of God. Alicenia gently stroked the goblin cub in her arms, which was sleeping soundly after eating its fill. In the cultural dominance of a medieval background, power was absolute. No one dared to challenge imperial authority. But there was one power that was even more deeply rooted in people's hearts than imperial authority: divine power. The supreme divine power. So even the Lionheart Emperor had to show great respect to the church. Hearing this, Charles II was initially stunned and looked in surprise at the Holy Mother standing at the door, silently asking for an explanation. The Holy Mother squinted her eyes and shook her head helplessly, indicating that she also didn't know what divine will Alice was referring to. Charles II hurriedly asked, Alice, what is the will of God? After a long silence, Alicenia finally said, that is, to accept his punishment, so I can regain the power of God. What? What are you saying? You have tirelessly fought for the people of the empire. God would not punish you, Charles II said in astonishment. Alicenia seemed to be recalling something painful. I did something that angered God. My holy power has been stripped away. Only by accepting the punishment will God forgive me. The punishment she spoke of was this goblin cub. That was why she did not reject it but accepted it gladly. Hearing this, Charles II felt bewildered and curiously asked, what exactly happened? Tell me. I killed many soldiers, and failed to avenge them, so God stripped me of my power and sent down this punishment, Alicenia said with a look of pain and seriousness. God was inherently abstract, and the specifics of divine will varied from person to person. It was normal for the sword Saintess to believe this was divine punishment. At that moment, Charles II almost wanted to shout that God didn't exist. He quickly looked at the Holy Mother and signaled to her. The Holy Mother, somewhat at a loss, thought for a moment and said, Alice, this is not divine punishment, it is merely a failure. Pull yourself together. That's right, pull yourself together. I will have Duke Klein lead troops to exterminate the goblins and avenge you, Charles II echoed. The recent events involving the goblins had become increasingly serious, forcing him to personally order the troops to quell the disturbance. Otherwise, internal unrest would precede external pressures, making the Lionheart Empire unable to lift its head. Who could have imagined that a group of goblins could cause such a commotion? At this moment, Alicenia said again, you don't understand, none of you understand. I am no longer the sword Saintess. I am just a tragic woman, Alicenia, who gave birth to a goblin. Get out, all of you, get out. The reason she firmly believed this was divine punishment was all because Lin Tian's blood of ruin suppressed her holy powers. It would naturally recover after 10 days or so. Seeing her so agitated, Charles II and the others left the church first. Your Majesty, Alice is not very rational right now. I think it's best not to push her. Once she believes the punishment is over, she will regain her strength, the Holy Mother softly suggested. Charles II sighed. In my life, it was the first time I yelled at her like I did just now. Yet it was useless. What more can I do? During this time, I will trouble you to take care of that girl. You know how things are on my end. Because of a goblin issue, thousands of people had come to the palace seeking help. Prepared for danger in times of peace, many villagers were living in constant fear. He hoped the situation could be resolved soon. Then, Charles II returned to the palace sanctuary, seated high on the throne, exuding lion-like majesty and solemnity. He sent for Duke Klein. Before long, the sound of knights' armor clashing could be heard outside the hall. A red-haired young man in dazzling silver armor slowly walked in, appearing to be in his early 20s. His striking features carried a hint of charm even in their masculinity. Both beautiful and handsome. Despite his young age, he had become a duke, not through connections but through his strength. In the younger generation of the imperial family, his strength was second only to Alicenia's. Moreover, he was Austin's grandson. Charles II looked at him with satisfaction and asked, Klein, do you know why I called you here? Your Majesty, I will quell the goblin chaos, avenge Alice, my grandfather, and those fallen citizens of the Empire. Klein knelt on one knee, speaking resolutely. There was even a trace of gritted teeth hatred on his face. This was because he had grown up under Alice's influence, basking in her brilliant and magnificent light. To him, Alice was like a life mentor and an aspirational goal. But now, his beloved was defiled by a goblin, and his grandfather was dead. How could he not be furious? Charles II continued, very well, then let me ask you, are you afraid of the Great Tomb? According to the intelligence, Lin Tian and his group had already entered the Great Tomb. Even if faced with those inside the Great Tomb, I fear nothing. Klein declared firmly, his voice ringing out. Charles II couldn't help but smile in satisfaction. Good. I will give you 10,000 elite soldiers and 12 holy guards to accompany you. Even if you have to storm the Great Tomb, you must flatten that goblin tribe. Hearing this, Klein was still a bit surprised. He was given 10,000 elite soldiers. Even the church people were going along. Immediately, he regained his composure. I will not fail my mission. Ellipsis. Tian Quang tribe. Lin Tian had already arranged all the large and small affairs properly. Moreover, the breeding of the first month had reached the time of delivery. Faced with so many people giving birth for the first time, Lin Tian had to participate personally. Leah, have all the elves help with the deliveries. The tribe was bustling with activity. The moans of the women echoed throughout the valley, attracting the covetous eyes of many monsters. On one hand, they had to help with the deliveries, and on the other hand, they had to guard both sides of the valley to prevent monsters from intruding. At this moment, Brutal, looking anxious, ran over. Boss, we can't hold them off in front. Why don't you go take a look? Lin Tian frowned. Even he seemed frightened. He hurriedly rode his dragon to check it out. What he saw made him stunned. Outside the walls built at the mouth of the valley, there were dense, black masses. Everywhere. A system scan revealed. Bloodthirsty ghost corpse tiger, black scale-horned python, ghost-eyed blood spider. There were several 6th-tier monsters gathered. As for the 5th-tier monsters, there were dozens or even hundreds. The situation at the rear was not much better. Gobu Kwang and the others couldn't suppress them at all. Fortunately, the batch of muskets made by Lin Tian could hold them off. Otherwise, they would have been overrun. Damn it, I've scouted the surrounding 10 kilometers. Where did all these monsters come from? Damn it. Lin Tian had calculated everything but missed this step. He had been so cautious for so long, only to fall short here. He had been careless. He thought that under the protection of the Great Tomb, he could do as he pleased. If he hadn't been so busy these days, personally guiding the construction of the valley walls, the granary, the shelter, and the defense works, he would have used the life simulation system directly. With things as they were, Lin Tian had no choice but to say, all goblins, leave via the cliffs. Leave the breeding tools, we'll capture more later. They were just consumables. If they died, so be it. He could spend another 10 days or half a month capturing more outside. But just then, Lin Tian suddenly looked up and noticed a black figure, a birdman. Its eyes glowed blood red in the dim light. It was staring intently at him. Its wings were full and beautiful, looking about the same size as a human, with a bird's head and a human body covered in black feathers that were hard to see in the dark. Its feet had sharp claws that could easily crush a human skull. Cannibal Eagle. LV90. Race. Cannibal Eagle Demi-Human. Profession. None. Title. Black Meteor. Monster Lord. Sky Overlord. Health. 2700. Strength. 880. Defense. 730. Skills. Meteor Flash, Storm Feather, Skyfall, Call. Equipment. None. Overall. 4,000. Seeing its attribute panel, Lin Tian suddenly understood that this guy was the monster lord of this region. He remembered Brutal mentioning this before. The cannibal eagle looked at Lin Tian curiously and said incredulously, a small goblin can actually ride a dragon. Those eyes stared so intensely that they gave Lin Tian goosebumps. The cannibal eagle then asked suspiciously, are you the leader of this tribe? Yes, Lord, Lin Tian replied. Lord, can you help disperse these gathered monsters? There was still a chance to save the situation. With one order from the Lord, all the monsters could be driven away. However, the cannibal eagle tilted its head, coldly asking, why should I help you? I can offer you 10 humans. Lin Tian gritted his teeth. Anyway, it was just 10. Exchanging 10 for more than 1,000 was worth it. The cannibal eagle squinted its eyes, pondered for a moment, and then flew high into the sky. It took a deep breath. A sharp screech emitted from its beak. Hearing this soul-shaking eagle cry, the gathered monsters scattered like they had seen a ghost. They hid like frightened chicks. Lin Tian covered his ears. The sound was too harsh. But seeing the horde of monsters disperse, he finally felt relieved. The scent of humans will attract all the monsters within 100 miles. Is this your first time in the Great Tomb? The cannibal eagle flew back and asked. Lin Tian understood now. No wonder humans were so averse and fearful of the Great Tomb. It all made sense now. Humans giving birth would sweat profusely, emitting a strong scent that goblin smells couldn't cover. Normally, it was fine. Lin Tian replied awkwardly, I understand. Thank you, Lord. Let's go. I will fulfill my promise. Hearing this, the cannibal eagle smiled slightly. It followed him into the valley. Brutal was extremely grateful and, seeing the cannibal eagle, quickly knelt. Lord. However, the cannibal eagle paid him no mind and was very interested in those 10 people. But when it saw the over 1,000 people, it was utterly stunned. Why do you have so many humans here? Are they all breeding tools for you goblins? Chapter 65. The Arrival of the Army. Great Battle. T.L. Sungman. He was the lord of the enchanted forest to the east. He had never eaten so many people in his life. Just a mere goblin tribe, and yet there were so many. Don't you understand the contract between the Great Tomb and the church? Do you want to die? The cannibal eagle snapped out of his shock and spoke sternly. Lin Tian found a few who were near death due to difficult labor and gave them to him. Don't worry, we captured these before we came here. Hearing this, the cannibal eagle hesitated for a long time but eventually chose to accept. He was too tempted. But he also feared causing trouble. In 10 seconds, he swallowed a human whole. After almost being full, he said, very good. Do you have a name? Lin Tian. Good. If you have any problems in the future, come to me anytime. I will ensure your safety and that you can develop steadily here. The cannibal eagle had someone bring a sack to pack the rest. Lin Tian raised his eyebrows slightly, somewhat surprised. Thank you for your concern, Lord. If you want more, I can offer you a few more humans. Ha ha ha. Then I won't be polite. I will first report the situation to the other lords. Immediately, the cannibal eagle took off, transforming into a black meteor and disappearing. Lin Tian let out a long sigh of relief. Now they could finally develop without worry. Everyone else wiped off their cold sweat, relieved after a false alarm. Looking at the newborn goblin infants, Lin Tian asked, Gobu Yu, have you counted how many there are? 3,000. During the second birth, there should be more, but none of the 10 mutant and overlord variant offspring survived, Gobu Yu replied while writing on a wooden board. Lin Tian had previously piqued her curiosity with human writing while mapping routes. So he taught her some basics. Unexpectedly, she had an extraordinary talent for learning and picked it up quickly. Hearing this, Lin Tian felt a bit regretful. It seems that mutant and overlord variants are almost impossible to produce more of. But it was enough for now. Next, they would capture some animals and monsters to breed more low-level goblins. Although they were cannon fodder, a large number of them could still overwhelm the enemy. System. Activate life simulation. Lin Tian said, capturing those creatures wouldn't require personal experience. Simulating directly would be faster. Life simulation system is starting. Current scenario. First entry into the Great Tomb. After enduring countless hardships, you finally settled down and could develop for a long time. Now you need to breed a large number of low-level goblins to expand your strength. So, you led your army into the enchanted forest to capture more. On the first day, You encountered many 4th and 5th tier monsters, killed them all, and took them back as food for the new generation of goblins. After several days, you captured 500 1st tier monsters, carnivorous rabbits, and crying face monkeys. On the way back, you encountered a 7th tier monster, the Thunder Mane Bear, with a strength of 3000. Since it was a female, you didn't kill it but captured it to improve the tribe's quality. Tasting success, you captured several more 7th tier monsters, imprisoning them as breeding tools. This greatly improved the overall quality of the tribe. In a month, the breeding tools for low-level goblins captured a total of 3000, which was enough. Just as you were immersed in the joy of rapid development, the tribe was unexpectedly attacked by humans. Option 1. Face them head on, not fearing them in your home ground. Rating: 30. Option 2. Hold your ground. Rating: 20. Option 3. Negotiate to find out their intentions. Rating: 0. Human attack. Seeing this, Lin Tian was full of questions. Wasn't this the Great Tomb? How could humans dare to come here? The rating wasn't important to Lin Tian, he needed to understand their intentions. So, he chose option 3. They didn't respond. By the time you realized it, soldiers were descending from the cliffs and began a massacre in the tribe. Several holy guards appeared at the front and back, encircling you. After a fierce battle, you escaped with a few people, suffering a crushing defeat. Seeing this, Lin Tian immediately understood. The Lionheart Empire's people and those church holy guards they encountered before. Even daring to enter the Great Tomb, it seemed they were desperate. Lin Tian immediately interrupted the life simulation to think of a way to respond before they arrived. Summary: when a lion is angry, make sure it can't bite you. Rating: 10 points out of 100. Reward: life points x 10. This life simulation is complete, the time span was 1 month. Brutal. Do you know where the Lord lives? After returning, Lin Tian quickly asked. The last time, that guy left in a hurry without telling him how to find him. Hearing this, Brutal thought for a moment. Just in the highest forested area around here. He and his tribe live there. Lin Tian acknowledged with a nod, having figured out a solution in his mind. As long as he summoned that guy, the people from the Lionheart Empire and the church wouldn't dare to do anything to him. Now, he could continue to develop his strength with peace of mind. In the future, he definitely needed to eliminate the thorn that was the Lionheart Empire, and the Holy Church as well. Otherwise, he couldn't consider himself truly safe. A month quickly passed, arriving at the day of the Empire and Church's ambush. Lin Tian had already found the cannibal eagle and informed him of the situation in advance. How do you know? They couldn't possibly dare to come. The Great Tomb has a contract with the church, the cannibal eagle said in disbelief. Lin Tian didn't know how to explain, so he simply said, when I was outside, I saw their army approaching. Considering what happened before I came here, they must be coming to attack me. Hearing this, the cannibal eagle understood. I see. Don't worry, I won't let humans run wild in the Great Tomb. Not just me, the others in the Great Tomb won't allow it either. Let me report this, then I'll come to find you. Thank you, Lord, Lin Tian said gratefully before returning to the Tian Quang tribe to wait. Time ticked by slowly. Gobu Tian, who was scouting outside, returned and pointed to the top of the valley. There are humans sneaking up there, boss. Should we take them out? Don't rush. What about the army outside? Lin Tian was more concerned about that. Gobu Tian replied, they're still about 20 kilometers away, stationed at the edge of the Great Tomb. Lin Tian acknowledged this and rode up to look at the top of the valley. Sure enough, there were a few blurry figures on the cliff, secretly watching them. On the steep cliff, an Imperial scout in stealth clothing exclaimed, damn, didn't the report say this tribe had at most a few hundred goblins? Why do I see thousands? After kidnapping so many village women, what do you think? It's infuriating. Another man said through gritted teeth. The man in stealth clothing scanned the area, and when he saw the 7th tier monsters imprisoned with their rear ends facing out, he was stunned. He couldn't help but ask, why are there so many high tier monkeys? They're not monkeys. Do you see? 7th tier monsters like the Thunder Mane Bear, Devil Stag, and Corpse Python, all not to be trifled with. The other man explained, increasingly shocked as he watched. A mere goblin tribe had imprisoned so many 7th tier monsters. 7th tier monsters could destroy a small town. But the man in stealth clothing was still puzzled. Isn't it only monkeys whose butts turn red? Damn, it can't be. As he wondered, he seemed to realize something. These 7th-tier monsters, each feared outside, had become breeding tools for the goblins. The other man also realized this, even more shocked. No wonder the sword Saintess fell victim. We need to report back immediately. It's too dangerous here. Just as the two were about to climb up and escape by another route, they turned and found themselves face to face with Gobu Tian and a group of hero variant dark goblins, coldly watching them from the cliff like spiders. The man in stealth clothing was so scared he slipped, screaming as he fell. Ah! Splat! He was shattered to pieces. Gobu Kwang, who was daydreaming, was overjoyed. Boss, it's raining meat. Ha ha ha. He quickly picked up the pieces and stuffed them into his mouth. The meat rain left Lin Tian speechless. Eat as much as you want. You're almost evolving into a leader variant. Currently, he was only 5th tier, and the leader variant was 6th tier, with the overlord variant being 7th tier. However, if he evolved to 6th tier, his strength could even crush some 7th tier beings. Recently, every goblin in the tribe had enjoyed an unprecedented number of new breeding tools. The group of 7th tier monsters with red rears was proof. By this time, Gobu Tian had already captured the other Imperial scout and climbed back down. All taken care of, boss. Good, this will make them hesitate to attack recklessly, Lin Tian said. As long as the enemy didn't launch a mindless all-out attack, they could hold their ground and wait for the cannibal eagle to arrive. Outside the Great Tomb, a well-equipped Imperial army stood ready. The dense crowd spread out massively. This time, the Lionheart Emperor had deployed over 10,000 elite soldiers with a clear purpose, to wipe out Lin Tian and his tribe. The army's imposing presence forced the monsters on the edge of the Great Tomb to flee wildly. Klein stood at the front of the army, pacing back and forth on his carnivorous horse, waiting for the scouts' report. Unable to hold back, he spoke, "Warriors. Today, we must prepare to not return until we've exterminated those goblins. Are you ready to enter the Great Tomb?" Yes. The 10,000-strong shout was deafening. Only then did Klein feel at ease, his eyes burning with anger. 10 holy guards stood solemnly at the edge of the Great Tomb. In front of them, sunlight shone in a range of over 10 meters. This was the first time the perpetually dark Great Tomb had seen light. Unfortunately, after waiting for 3 hours, the scouts didn't return. Klein grew restless, his longsword craving the blood of revenge. At that moment, a shadow flashed across the sky. It was Lin Tian riding a dragon, arriving before the army. Klein's intelligence indicated that a goblin leader was dragon riding. He immediately shouted, "You up there, are you the goblin leader who destroyed dozens of our villages?" Seeing the army, Lin Tian felt some pressure. He hadn't expected the Lionheart Empire to be so serious, deploying over 10,000 elite soldiers. However, he wasn't afraid. He countered, "Have you forgotten the contract between the church and the Great Tomb? Are you provoking us? You're just rats hiding in the Great Tomb. Killing you doesn't require worrying about the contract." Klein angrily replied. With a shhhk, he drew his longsword, pointing it directly at Lin Tian. Chapter 66. Draw your sword, Alice. TL. Sungman. Do you see the tens of thousands of lions behind me? I won't give you a chance. I will come in and crush your bones. For my grandfather and Alice. Klein gritted his teeth, ready to give the order to start the battle at any moment. Upon hearing this, Lin Tian got excited. Oh, so that's how it is. Let me secretly tell you, the taste of the sword Saintess was very smooth. You, shut up. Klein was so enraged by these words that he almost couldn't catch his breath. Even the soldiers behind him were infuriated. The sword Saintess was a respected figure throughout the entire empire. No one could tolerate her being desecrated, but now, she had been directly defiled. Lin Tian laughed heartily. What, you want me to shut this mouth that has tasted those sweet lips? The taste is even sweeter than honey. You. Klein's eyes were bloodshot and fierce. Your Highness, let's charge in directly. I want to grind his bones to dust right now. Grind my bones to dust. I think you want to hear about other places of the sword Saintess. Let me secretly tell you, even sweeter. Lin Tian added another stab. Originally, he had just wanted to come over and take a look at the situation, as the dense forest below made it impossible for the dragon to hide. He had no choice but to expose himself. Encountering this guy, he decided to taunt and provoke him. Lin Tian felt it was boring and had only said a few words before Klein lost his temper. Oh, look, he's angry. The veins on Klein's forehead bulged, his previously elegant noble demeanor completely gone. Your Highness. Wait, Duke. The scouts haven't returned yet. Rushing into the Great Tomb recklessly is dangerous. One of the holy guards said gravely. Only they had personally experienced the horrors of the Great Tomb. A young man like Klein wouldn't know, and now he was losing his temper, nearly losing his mind. Scouts. Lin Tian was slightly stunned and threw down the head of the scout from earlier. It rolled to the hooves of Klein's warhorse. Seeing this scene, Klein couldn't hold back any longer and shouted, "All troops, heed my command. Charge in. Slaughter all the monsters." The massive army seemed to be activated and started to move. The orderly steps were like the countdown to the enemy's death, ticking away bit by bit. Ha ha ha. Are you scared? Are you afraid? This is the consequence of angering the lions. I will crush your bones. Klein laughed arrogantly. He rode his warhorse, ready to charge directly into the enchanted forest. But when he shifted his gaze from Lin Tian to the forest ahead, his whole body froze. Goosebumps rose on his back. In the dim forest, a pair of eerie, blood-red eyes stared at him, sending chills down his spine. The holy guards, who had been silently reciting the Bible, suddenly sensed an extreme threat and picked up their weapons. Out of the forest, a cannibal eagle slowly emerged. Klein, looking at it, unknowingly broke out in cold sweat. His warrior's instinct told him this creature was not to be trifled with. Its appearance was like a guillotine hanging over everyone's heads, ready to fall at any moment, meaning it could kill anyone at any time. The cannibal eagle ignored Klein and looked at the holy guards. "Church, long time no see. Have you forgotten the pact you made? It's the cannibal eagle. Everyone be careful," one of the holy guards said. The leader of these holy guards, the guardian of the sanctuary, spoke. "Cannibal eagle, this is the Pope's order. You have no right to negotiate with us. Those goblins committed unforgivable crimes and just entered the Great Tomb. We have the right to go in and exterminate them." As he spoke, he raised his massive sword and pointed it at the Great Tomb. Imposing and majestic. But the cannibal eagle showed no fear. "Ha ha ha. Is that old man still alive? Your arrogance won't last long. When that old man finally dies of old age, I'll personally crush your skull." Humans could only live for 100 years. But most monsters could live for hundreds of years, and some, like the undead, could even achieve immortality. The strongest in the Great Tomb happened to be one of the undead. So they could outlast the Pope no matter what. You don't need to worry about the future. I will say this one last time. I am here by the Pope's order to exterminate the goblins. If you dare to stop us, you will die. The sanctuary guardian's cold and resolute aura instantly snapped Klein and the others out of their shock. Upon hearing this, Klein shouted again, "All troops, heed my command, continue advancing." Boom, boom, boom. The army marched forward, unstoppable. The cannibal eagle fell silent for a moment, then slowly flew up and said, "It seems you think the Great Tomb is a place you can enter and leave as you please." Immediately, a piercing screech echoed. The forest began to stir. Crack, crack. The sound of trees snapping and falling echoed continuously. Pairs of blood-red eyes opened in the dim forest. Dense and numerous, they formed an impenetrable wall. Moreover, dozens of cannibal eagles also flew up from the forest, and it wasn't just cannibal eagles. The feathered serpent tribe, a type of subhuman species, also appeared. With the body of a snake and the wings of a bird, their overall strength was around the 7th tier. There was once even a feathered serpent god who reached the 12th tier. In the forest, more and more eyes gathered, and the continuous low growls of terrifying beasts instilled fear in people. The advancing army, upon seeing the dense mass of crimson eyes ahead, was too frightened to move forward. At this moment, Lin Tian noticed that many monsters were gathering in the forest. There were the Tiger Clan, goblins, the undead, and many more. Even many low-intelligence monsters had come under the skill call of the cannibal eagle. 100-legged centipedes, razor mantises, spore monsters, rock giants. Nearly 27th-tier monsters. In total, there were thousands of monsters here. The overwhelming pressure paralyzed the tens of thousands of Imperial soldiers, making them too afraid to advance. Klein swallowed hard, and after calming down, he raised his sword again, gritting his teeth, preparing to shout the charge order once more. However, the sanctuary guardian spoke first. "So, the Great Tomb has decided to shelter those goblins. You can think of it that way," the cannibal eagle said contemptuously. Upon hearing this, the sanctuary guardian was silent for a moment, then turned. "Duke, withdraw the troops." "Your Highness, did I hear wrong?" "Withdraw. The lions of the Empire would rather die in battle than become deserters." "I want to kill that guy," Klein said, unwilling to give up. The sanctuary guardian suddenly looked at him. This is not retreating, but preparing for a bigger battle. Through the gap in the helmet, Klein saw those eyes emitting a faint golden light. The shocking gaze made him calm down instantly. As if he understood something. Klein turned and shouted to the soldiers, "All troops, retreat. Remember, the lions are not running away, but preparing to return." On the way back, Klein couldn't help but ask, "The Great Tomb is willing to go to war with us and the church just to shelter that guy?" "No, the Great Tomb is no longer afraid of the church." The sanctuary guardian walked a few steps ahead, saying nothing more. Watching them leave, Lin Tian was truly moved. "Lord, isn't this a bit much, going to such lengths for me?" The cannibal eagle smiled indifferently, gesturing for everyone to disperse. Then he looked at Lin Tian. "You know, this isn't just for you. It's to use your situation to tell those church guys that our Great Tomb no longer fears them." "I see." Lin Tian somewhat understood, but overall, it seemed the cannibal eagle was a trustworthy guy. Just as he was about to leave, the cannibal eagle added, "By the way, develop your tribe as quickly as possible. There's someone very important in the Great Tomb who thinks highly of you. They asked me to tell you that if you can become the Goblin King, you will qualify to enter the true Great Tomb." Upon hearing this, Lin Tian didn't think there was anything particularly extraordinary about the Great Tomb. However, seeing the longing in the cannibal eagle's eyes, it seemed there might really be something good inside. But for now, he had finally secured a truly safe golden period for development. In at most a year, he could build an army strong enough to confront the empire. The Great Tomb, indeed, has very rich resources. Lin Tian said, riding the dragon back to the Tian Kuang tribe. He needed to make the most of these resources to develop as quickly as possible. Ellipsis. Lionheart Empire. Imperial City. The time was the 5th day after Klein had left with his troops. Charles II was already busy to the point of exhaustion. Enough already. The Goblin issue hasn't been resolved, and now there's another mess. Upon hearing this, the many ministers who had come down from the sanctuary to discuss matters with him forced a smile and hurriedly withdrew. Charles II sighed continuously. He sat for a long time before finally getting up and heading towards the church. Looking through the window at the sword Saintess inside, his eyes were full of sorrow and helplessness. At this moment, the Holy Mother noticed him and whispered, "Your Majesty, you know the current situation. What do you think I should do?" Charles II asked helplessly. The Holy Mother was silent for a moment before finally deciding, "It depends on your own thoughts, Your Majesty. One side is the people, and the other is her." The news that the sword Saintess had given birth to a goblin had already spread throughout the imperial city. The residents were staging large-scale protests, demanding the execution of that goblin. Especially those villagers from out of town who had been plundered by goblins, they hated them to the core. Having nowhere to vent their anger, this was now the best place. Kill the goblin. Nobles must set an example. The human territory cannot tolerate a goblin living. Kill it. Avenge my child. It must be killed. If you don't kill it, we won't rest for a day. On the streets, outside the church, countless residents gathered, expressing their hatred for goblins. With internal and external troubles, the Lionheart Emperor hadn't slept for days. In the church, finally, Charles II walked in, calmly saying, "Alice, are you feeling better lately?" "Your Majesty, I'm not sick. Why do you ask that?" Alicenia asked, puzzled. She was rocking a wooden horse, upon which sat the goblin she had given birth to. In a few days, it had already grown to the size of a baby. Looking at that evil face, drooling, and frantically shaking the wooden horse, making a crack crack sound, Charles II's face darkened instantly. A naturally evil monster, the wooden horse was originally a toy for children. In its hands, it was violently dismantled. There were already 2 broken wooden horses piled beside it. He then coldly asked, "Alice, have you heard the noise outside these days?" "Yes, I have," Alicenia said indifferently. Charles II's expression suddenly became serious. "Then what do you think?" However, Alicenia didn't care at all. "I don't care about them. I am now just an ordinary person, no longer the sword Saintess." Hearing this, Charles II seemed struck by lightning. He finally made that decision. "To think you've changed because of a goblin. I should have nipped this in the bud back then," Charles II said painfully. The sound of metal scraping was heard. He slowly drew the golden-hilted sword from his waist. Looking at Alice, he said, "Alice, step aside a bit. I might hurt you." Chapter 67. Gobu Kuang evolves, Enchanted Goblin. TL. Sungman. He drew his longsword from its sheath, the cold iron aura spreading throughout the church. Alice's expression suddenly darkened, and she said with a somber face, "Your Majesty, what do you mean by this? For the people of the Empire and the future of the Empire, I must bring you back to the right path." As Charles II spoke, he aimed the sword at the goblin and thrust it forward. However, he froze in place. Alice had caught the Imperial sword with her bare hands, blood dripping from her palm and staining the ground. "Alice, you." Charles II was heartbroken, but this only strengthened his resolve to eliminate the goblin. Suddenly, a cold flash burst forth. Alice had already drawn her sword, aiming at Charles II. The cold blade was only 1 centimeter from his neck. The atmosphere grew tense. The Lionheart Emperor's strength was around 5,000, but he could not truly bring himself to strike Alice. "Your Majesty, will I never receive forgiveness? Why do you also treat me this way?" Alice's face lifted, full of tears. Seeing this, Charles II dropped his sword and walked out helplessly. As he passed by the Holy Mother at the door, he said heavily, "Please, call the Cardinal." The Cardinal, usually dressed in a red monk's robe, held a position second only to the Supreme Pope. His strength far exceeded that of the temple guards, and he was also a candidate for the Pope. The Holy Mother sighed and went to invite him. Soon, a figure arrived outside the church, barefoot, dressed in a red robe, with a hood obscuring his appearance. Upon seeing the Lionheart Emperor, he lowered his hood, revealing his face. He appeared to be around 50 years old, bald, with a red cross tattooed in the center of his forehead. His eyes were golden and deep. Charles II hurriedly said, "Cardinal, please resolve this matter. I cannot do it myself. May the Lord help the sword Saintess through this trial." The Cardinal then put on his hood and walked into the church, praying as he looked at the golden crucifix. From a distance, Alice noticed him and, warily, gripped the now dull and rusted holy sword in her hand. "Cardinal, I hope you will leave. I do not want to hear anything right now," Alice said coldly, holding her sword and slowly standing up. The Cardinal made a cross gesture and said with clasped hands, "God will not abandon you, it is you who have abandoned God. Hand over that goblin, Lady Alice." Before he finished speaking, Alice's cold blade was already at the Cardinal's face. Super tier holy skill, holy light radiance. Bang! A burst of golden light erupted from his body, shaking Alice's sword from her hand. The next second, the Cardinal grasped his crucifix and activated another skill, super tier holy skill, holy judgment cage. Buzz! A ball of holy light descended from the sky, trapping Alice. In her weakened state, without a weapon, she had no strength to resist. The Cardinal looked at the small goblin still dismantling the wooden horse, then glanced at the massive crucifix before him. Picking up the nearby sword, he walked over. Alice knelt and kowtowed. "No. Please, don't. That is my punishment. I must accept God's punishment. I have no divine power left." Swish. However, for someone of the Cardinal's high rank, decisions were made swiftly. To end things as quickly as possible, he directly thrust the sword through the small goblin's head. Seeing this, Alice cried heartbreakingly, knowing she could never be forgiven by God. She felt herself losing consciousness, fainting to the ground. The Cardinal withdrew the cage and left the church. "Your Majesty, the rest is up to you." With that, he departed. Charles II hurried inside and immediately saw the small goblin dead at the foot of the crucifix. The weight lifted from his heart. He quickly checked on the unconscious Alice. Fortunately, she was fine. "Holy Mother, please take care of Alice. I must now give an explanation to the people of the Empire," Charles II said, carrying the small goblin's corpse as he walked outside the palace. At this moment, many protesting residents were still gathered. Each one had eyes filled with anger and hatred. "Kill the goblin. The sword Saintess no longer deserves to wield the holy sword. As that person still the sword Saintess we knew. Raising a goblin. Disgusting. I used to like her so much, but she's just trash. A disgrace. Disgusting." The insults and curses continued endlessly. With a grim face, Charles II descended the high steps, holding the goblin's corpse. The residents' voices abruptly fell silent. Their eyes were fixed on the goblin's corpse. After a long silence, the crowd erupted. "Long live the king. He finally eliminated this monster for us. Goblins deserve to die. All of them. Where's that sword Saintess slut? Is she dead? I think it's best if she's dead." The residents cheered, shouting, "Long live the Lionheart Emperor." Charles II threw the goblin's corpse into the crowd. "I have given you the explanation you wanted, but anyone who speaks ill of the sword Saintess will face the consequences." His words silenced the cursing residents. Then, Charles II turned and walked back to the palace, his silhouette seemingly burdened with great weight. Because he did not know what Alice would become when she awoke. The next day, Charles II, already feeling guilty, was daydreaming in the Empire's temple. The Holy Mother burst in with shocking news, Your Majesty. Alice, she's gone. What? Charles II jumped up from the throne in a panic. The Holy Mother looked innocent. This morning, when I brought her food, the room was empty. Her mental state is unstable now, and she's likely to encounter trouble. Someone, send out all scouts to find her. Charles II was utterly flustered, not expecting things to turn out this way. If anything happened to the sword Saintess, it would not only be a devastating blow to him but also a significant loss for the entire empire. However, when the residents learned that the sword Saintess had escaped, they began to mock her. In a tavern, the tavern owner looked around, confirming there were no Imperial members present, and whispered, Hey, did you hear? That slut of a sword Saintess has run away. Run away. Where did she go? At this moment, an epic-level adventurer drinking in the tavern asked curiously. He was a regular at this tavern and a somewhat famous figure in the imperial city, known as Odric the Sinful Swordsman. Everyone was drawn to him. The tavern owner shook his head. I don't know, I just heard it from a scout who came to drink today. Odric sneered. Who cares about her? That slut was fucked by goblins. It's best if she's dead, I find her disgusting. Exactly. Her brain must be messed up by goblins. She even raised a goblin. Disgusting. Everyone agreed. In their eyes, the person they once respected the most was now filled with contempt. At this moment, a young man couldn't help but say, but the sword Saintess used to serve us, defeating many monsters and enemies that threatened the empire. If she doesn't do it, others will. Whoever takes up the holy sword must bear that responsibility. Don't make it seem like we owe her. Odric grabbed the young man's neck and coldly responded. Now, it seemed that anyone who spoke well of the sword Saintess was a target for criticism. The young man could only leave the tavern quietly, not daring to make a sound. Ellipsis. Time returned to when Klein's army retreated from the Great Tomb. Lin Tian handed a few humans to the cannibal eagle. Lord, consider this a thank you for helping me this time. Little Tian, I accept your kindness. We monsters must unite, or we will be driven to despair by humans. The cannibal eagle said emotionally. Lin Tian nodded, spending the following days capturing monsters in the forest, stocking up enough food. The tribe's population would explode in the later stages, requiring large supplies to sustain them. Not to mention sustaining them, increasing strength also required a lot of flesh and blood. Boss, I feel like I'm about to evolve. Within the tribe, Gobu Kwang, who was carrying deer into the smokehouse, suddenly spoke. Everyone gathered around. Lin Tian was slightly stunned and checked his panel. You're really at level 70, about to evolve into a leader variant. Now, he couldn't guarantee that every goblin in the tribe had the potential to evolve into an overlord variant. But leader variants were more than sufficient. With 10 different types of 7th tier monsters, along with humans, and dozens of low tier monsters available for use. Gobu Kwang roared in pain. It felt like all his bones were breaking. His entire body twisted and writhed on the ground, emitting scorching steam. His skin seemed to be burning. Chunks of skin visibly burned away, exposing fresh red flesh underneath. However, soon, the burned skin began to regenerate. It turned black and purple with a web-like pattern, glowing faintly blue. Moreover, his original 4 hands became 6. 2 more hands grew from his waist, and 2 more from his back. The 2 hands on his back burned with a ghostly blue flame. His body shape hadn't changed much. He looked like a black-skinned athlete. It's an enchanted goblin. A very rare variant. At this moment, Goblin Slayer exclaimed in surprise. Enchanted goblins usually evolved after consuming a large number of magical monsters, with an extremely low probability of becoming this variant. Their most significant feature was the ability to use a bit of magic. Gobu Kwang. LV 70. Race. Goblin. Profession. Dark Magician. Title. Enchanted Newborn. Gluttonous Gourmand. God's Blessing. Health. 2000. Strength. 501. Defense. 540. Skills. Evil Hand. Demonic Flame. Savage Charge. High Pressure Domain. Equipment. None. Overall. 3100. Lin Tian was slightly surprised, thinking that this guy would eat himself into uselessness with how much he ate. But luck was on his side, and he became the rarest variant. Now, aside from himself, He was the strongest in the tribe. The thought of a goblin using magic was terrifying. Chapter 68. You seek trouble, I'll wipe out your family. TL. Sungman. Boom. At this moment, a ball of blue flame filled with demonic energy flew towards a giant rock ahead. It instantly exploded into fragments. Moreover, the flames continued to envelop the debris, burning without dissipating. They even reduced the stone to powder. Gobu Kwang grinned foolishly. Haha, boss, I can use magic now. HMPH, what's so great about that? Boss, I want to apply to eat more meat and blood. I also want to quickly reach level 70. Gobu Shan said, clearly dissatisfied. Gobu Tian felt the same way. All of them were resentful because their smaller appetites had left them behind in levels. Fortunately, it was only a difference of 1 or 2 levels. However, most of the meat and blood were from low-tier monsters, and even a 1 or 2 level difference required eating a lot. They simply didn't have that kind of appetite. It's worth noting that when Lin Tian leveled up 5 levels, he had eaten the entire Niugui clan, over 100 tons of meat and blood, in a day and a night. Along with those soldiers, Lin Tian certainly didn't refuse. Go ahead, I wish you would eat more meat and blood and evolve quickly. Each of you is so unmotivated to improve your strength. It's a wonder you're still alive, thanks to me. Gobu Tian and the others felt awkward. They then prepared to eat the stored food. Lin Tian coughed heavily. Ahem. What are you doing? This enchanted forest lacks everything except monsters. Go out and catch some yourselves. It will also improve your combat experience. Boss, it's dangerous out there. Gobu Dao said. At this time, Lin Tian's eyes turned cold. Do you think I'm very safe? Gobu Shan quickly laughed awkwardly. We're going out right now. Hee hee. Boss, don't be angry. Lin Tian cursed. Really gave you face, and you still want free food. All this food was stored for the newly grown goblins to first increase their basic levels. Otherwise, in this enchanted forest, going out would mean death. Without any combat power, they were better off not going. Boss, I'll go help them. I feel a violent force within me that needs to be unleashed. Gobu Kwang said at this moment. Lin Tian nodded. Just as they left, the cannibal eagle appeared again in the sky above the tribe. It slowly descended and said somewhat embarrassedly, Little Tian, I want to introduce you to a lord. Lin Tian quickly came up to greet it. Oh. I'd be delighted to meet other lords. It's good to have more to fall back on. If you offend someone you can't afford to, you can just name these guys. Not a loss at all. As long as you don't mind, it's the one behind you. The cannibal eagle pointed behind him. Lin Tian turned around and saw that at some point, a golden iguana had appeared there. It was at least 3 meters tall and looked identical to the lizardman from Spider-Man, except its scales were golden. If you didn't pay attention, you'd think it was a pile of gold there. Those cold pupils were scrutinizing the breeding area of the Tian Quang tribe. Full of desire, a slender tongue darted out from time to catch scents. Lin Tian first checked its attribute panel. Named Golden Iguana, it was a subhuman species, level 88, with a strength of only 3,990, not very strong. Then, pretending to be friendly, he approached and said, Lord, are you interested in humans? The golden iguana ignored him and continued looking at the humans in the cages. Then it turned to the cannibal eagle. These humans look so delicious, Birdman, let's split them 50-50. Hearing this, the cannibal eagle was a bit dumbfounded. 50-50. Didn't you say just one would be enough? Originally, it had brought him here after much pleading to eat a human, but now he wanted half. Hearing this, Lin Tian's already unhappy face turned even gloomier. At this moment, the golden iguana said, in our territory, aren't all the things inside ours? Besides, this is just a goblin tribe, a low-level monster tribe of trash. Even if a goblin becomes a king, its strength at most would be like ours now, but we are different, we can still grow. The cannibal eagle's expression wasn't good either. Iguana, but here I call the shots. Please return to your southern territory. Stop pretending. Many in your tribe haven't eaten humans, right? And you still call yourselves cannibal eagles. I've been fair enough, 50-50. Let's fight now, how about it? The golden iguana continued, eyes full of greed. Lin Tian finally spoke coldly. Hey, where did this reptile come from? Half, can you even eat that much? Suddenly, the golden iguana let out a hiss sound. Very creepy. It looked at Lin Tian with aggression and hostility, its eyes filled with murderous intent. Are you talking to me, you low-level trash? However, The cannibal eagle suddenly blocked Lin Tian. Iguana, I'll say this one last time. Leave now, or you won't be able to handle the consequences. He had heard about Lin Tian's feats. They even took care of the sword Saintess, provoking humans to send an army of 10,000 to exterminate them, and even the church got involved. It was evident that this was not an ordinary goblin tribe. The golden iguana still wouldn't let it go. You just want to hog these humans for yourself. Fine, I don't want them anymore. Let me kill that small goblin. Suddenly, the cannibal eagle let out a screech. The powerful sound wave forced the golden iguana to take a half step back. It wasn't joking around. Seeing this, the golden iguana glared fiercely at Lin Tian. Fine, Birdman, you're tough now, but there will be times when you're not around. I'll kill them all. After saying that, the golden iguana disappeared into the darkness. Sorry, I didn't expect that guy to be so greedy. The cannibal eagle looked at Lin Tian apologetically. Lin Tian didn't mind. No need to apologize. I was thinking, if I kill him, what will the people in the Great Tomb do? The cannibal eagle was slightly surprised, astonished that he truly had such power. Then it said, they might expel you, kill you, or perhaps make you the Lord of the South. I'll take my leave now. Becoming the Lord of the South. Lin Tian thought about it, feeling that being a lord was useless. It just allowed one to call on monsters. The key was that as a lord, he couldn't wantonly kill monsters like he could now. He wouldn't want it even if it was given to him. Ellipsis. In the enchanted forest, Gobu Shan walked at the front, looking around as if entering a buffet and selecting ingredients. The iron-skinned rhinoceros is too tough, not tasty. The poisonous porcupine, it pricks the mouth. The devil dragonfly, not much meat. As they walked, Gobu Shan kept complaining, oh, why isn't there anything delicious? What do you think, Gobu Tian? Humans are still the best. Gobu Tian said, leaping through the trees. Suddenly, they realized something was wrong, as if someone was missing. Turning around, they found Gobu Kwang gorging himself. One hand held the leg of an iron-skinned rhinoceros, while the other hand treated the devil dragonfly like a skewer, roasting it with a stick. As for the poisonous porcupine, he had already cut it open like an urchin and was preparing to taste it. Gobu Shan and Gobu Tian were dumbfounded. Does this guy gnaw on every living thing? Stop eating. Let's find something tastier, Gobu Kwang. Gobu Tian said. Then, Gobu Kwang threw down his food and ran after them. After that, the path was littered with skeletal remains and pieces of flesh. As long as it was a fifth-tier monster or above, the three of them would kill and share it. They didn't know how long or how far they walked, or how many monsters they ate. Finally, Gobu Shan reached level 70 and began to evolve. Because the mutant variant was a special existence, once a mutation occurred, it would definitely mutate again during evolution. This meant that Gobu Shan could evolve into a mutant leader variant. The bone spurs on his body began to fall off, and he looked like an ordinary green goblin, exhausted and kneeling on the ground, in great discomfort. How do you feel? Gobu Tian asked curiously. Gobu Kwang, who had just finished evolving, explained, it feels very painful, like being burned by a ball of fire. The boss said everyone's evolution is different and feels different. Gobu Kwang, you're too dumb to even remember the boss's words. Gobu Tian said, annoyed, looking at him. Feeling embarrassed, Gobu Kwang scratched his head. At this moment, Gobu Shan began to mutate, his bones making cracking sounds. His body grew long and slender, reaching over 2 meters in height but very thin. He looked like a bamboo joint. Then, every inch of his body started to grow bones, forming an exoskeleton. Until it covered his entire body. His head looked like it was wearing a skull helmet, making him look like a creepy white skeleton. I feel like I've grown taller. Gobu Shan said excitedly after completing his evolution. Gobu Tian swallowed, not only taller but also. Gobu Shan ran excitedly to a puddle to check. One look and he was shocked. Touching his body, where's my flesh? Why have I become a skeleton? Help, I need to find the boss. Don't panic. We saw your flesh covered by your bones. Gobu Tian said, looking at him like an idiot, speechless. He felt that Gobu Shan seemed even dumber than Gobu Kwang. After calming down, Gobu Shan finally understood his changes. He could control the bones on his body at will, forming long, sharp blades or solid shields. He looked thin, but was as hard as iron. Gobu Shan transformed his left hand into a giant bone shield and his right hand into a sharp blade, lightly swinging at a large tree in front of him. The tree fell instantly. A bump with the shield had the same effect. His strength had greatly increased. Let's go find something for Gobu Tian to eat so he can evolve too. Gobu Shan said with a big smile. The three continued forward. Soon, they found many white bones piled up ahead. There were corpses of various animals. Approaching quietly, they saw a damp swamp ahead. On the swampy ground, many large grass huts were built, indicating a certain tribe lived there. Gobu Tian, with his keen eyes, spotted something. Look over there. There's something golden, like an iguana. Gobu Kwang saw it too and said, it looks delicious. Let's eat. Hee hee. Chapter 69. Isn't that my uncle? T.L. Sungman. This was the lair of the Golden Iguana tribe. The home of the southern enchanted forest lord. At this moment, a small golden iguana was chasing a dragonfly, venturing far from home into the reeds. Its innocent, big eyes carefully searched every place. Its tongue flicked out occasionally to catch scents. However, after flicking its tongue, it had a strange expression, huh. There's a weird smell around here. As it was still curious, a pair of black hands stretched out from the mossy mud beneath it. Pulled it straight down. When Gobu Tian slowly crawled out of the swampy mud pit, he was holding a dead golden iguana. He looked at the two people and said, come and try this. It seems like a juvenile, but it's already over a meter long. Gobu Kwang tore off an iguana leg, crunching it in his mouth. The meat was very tender and fresh. Slightly fishy, with a faint sweetness. This taste is amazing. No worse than human meat. Gobu Shan's eyes lit up after tasting it. After all, it was a subhuman species, so the taste was similar. The three exchanged glances and seemed to reach a consensus. Child, where have you gone? In the iguana tribe, a mother iguana called out anxiously. It was mealtime, but her gluttonous child hadn't returned. A iguana head peeked out from a nearby grass hut, teasing, that unlucky kid of yours is always running around. Could it have been caught by monsters outside? My husband is the Lord. What monster would dare catch my child? It must be tired of living. The mother iguana retorted angrily. At that moment, Gobu Shan's voice rang out, are you looking for him? He tossed a shiny iguana head at the mother's feet. The mother iguana was stunned, crying out, who are you? Don't you know this is the Lord's tribe? How dare you? How dare you? The Lord. What's that? But madam, you do look beautiful. Gobu Kwang's cunning voice echoed as he flipped over the hut and emerged, his eyes full of desire as he looked at her. The iguana man in the hut immediately rushed out with a weapon. How dare you disrespect the Lord's wife? Unfortunately, he didn't finish his sentence as a long bone spike pierced his heart. Gobu Shan immediately started roasting him on a nearby bonfire. In a few bites, he devoured him completely. The average strength of these iguanas was around 2,000. 2,000 plus was considered high. The iguana tribe could only have one male leader. This meant other male iguanas couldn't be too strong, or they would threaten the leader. Help! Save me! The mother iguana, still angry, was suddenly grabbed by Goblin's large hand and held in his arms, being rubbed all over. Just as he was about to proceed, he thought of something. Oh, this has to be saved for the boss. He then knocked her unconscious with a slap. Gobu Tian, hurry up and eat. You're about to evolve, aren't you? Gobu Shan threw the roasted iguana over. Monsters are invading. The Lord isn't here. What should we do? Why would monsters dare invade us? Didn't the Lord intimidate all the nearby ones? They seem to be from the Goblin tribe. Doesn't matter. Grab your weapons and fight back. Quickly, the iguana tribe gathered over 100 males, but they were only 2 meters tall, much smaller than the iguana lord. Their strength was less than half of his. Gobu Kwang, seeing such a large group gathered, sneered and activated his skill, Demonic Flame. The 2 balls of eerie blue fire in his hands were thrown out. They exploded among the iguana crowd. Ah! Screams echoed continuously. Over a dozen iguanas were hit by the flames, unable to extinguish them no matter how hard they tried. Even burying themselves in the mud didn't help. The slightest flame burned to the bone, melting their bones and burning through their bodies. Such was the power of the demonic flame. Similar to modern society's white phosphorus bombs. On the other side, a large group of iguanas pinned Gobu Shan to the ground. They hammered him with hammers and stones, trying to crush him. The clanging sounds continued, but it was futile. His bone armor's defense was far higher than iron armor, regenerating as soon as it broke. Gobu Shan, unable to move, simply gave up struggling and reshaped his bone armor. His entire body became like a porcupine, covered in sharp bone spikes. He instantly impaled over a dozen iguanas. Gobu Tian was beside him, collecting corpses and devouring them, finally starting to evolve. His small body didn't change much, but a set of thin cicada wings grew from his back, and two antennae appeared on his front. He now looked somewhat similar to a cockroach. And, it also had a tongue similar to an iguana's. It could capture the scent of enemies in the air, making it possible to detect them even if they were invisible. Golden scales began to appear on its skin, just like an iguana, but not just golden. In the blink of an eye, they turned black. Then green, white, purple, and other various colors. Finally, they became transparent, and its whole body only showed a faint outline, as if it were invisible. These scales could form camouflage, blending with the surrounding environment. Gobu Tian was still exploring his changes when the antennae on his head twitched. Swish. Gobu Tian quickly turned around and directly reached out to kill an iguana that was trying to sneak up on him. He remarked, "The antennae are light and sensitive, able to feel changes in the air to detect sneak attacks, not bad." He then shook his wings and took off from the spot. Unfortunately, he couldn't fly too high or too fast, but for sudden speed bursts during ground attacks, it was excellent. "Lord, where have you gone?" Not far away, an iguana holding a stone hammer stood still, full of despair. Before him, the scene had turned into a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood, with flames extending far. 3 bizarre goblins were devouring his clan members. Even those not completely dead were being eaten bit by bit. Burp tilde. "I'm full. Let's go back." The boss said not to annihilate them completely, let them reproduce, and we'll come back. Gobu Tian burped, feeling very satisfied. Gobu Shan nodded. "I'm full too. It's good that I evolved. The boss will surely praise me. Let's go then." Gobu Kwang carried the mother iguana on his shoulder, holding a smaller one with his left hand. This puzzled Gobu Shan. "Isn't that unnecessary? You don't need to pack leftovers." Upon hearing this, Gobu Kwang found a moment where someone else seemed dumber than him. "You ungrateful wolves, just caring about eating and enjoying yourselves, forgetting the boss. I'll report you later." "Hey, don't. Next time we catch humans, I'll give you more, okay?" Ellipsis. After they left, in the forest, the golden iguana lord walked with a grim face. "Damn birdmen, damn goblins, once I find a way to get rid of the birdmen, all humans will be my food." And, as he spoke, the hatred in his eyes deepened. He gritted his teeth. "I'll also kill those damn goblins. How dare they disdain me?" When he reached the outside of his tribe, he tried to calm himself. He planned to relieve his stress with his wife when he got back. But the moment he entered, he felt like he was dreaming or had come to the wrong place. The iguana lord rubbed his eyes. "Impossible, impossible. Where is this? It feels familiar. Huh, why does this person look so much like my uncle? And there's my third brother, interesting." The iguana lord muttered to himself as he looked at the barely recognizable corpses on the ground. Moreover, some bodies were covered in filth. It was obvious someone had desecrated them. Many iguana children's bodies had turned into skeletons, with just a bit of flesh left. At this moment, a few iguana heads peeked out from the reeds nearby. The Lord is back. Great, we're saved." A few iguanas, dragging their battered bodies, hurried over. Seeing them, the iguana lord finally accepted this reality. He roared to the sky. Who did this? He couldn't believe that as the Lord, someone dared to ransack his home. That's why he didn't accept the reality at first. The iguanas cried. It was 3 strange goblins, they must be high tier. They were too strong. We couldn't fight back, and the madam and daughter were taken. Goblins. The iguana lord's pupils trembled. His wife and daughter were taken. He immediately thought of the Tian Quang tribe. But then he shook his head. Impossible, I was just there. They couldn't have come so quickly for revenge, and they wouldn't dare. He then speculated which goblin tribe in the enchanted forest could have done it. There were 3 goblin tribes in his southern territory, the strongest being overlord variants under his control, so it couldn't be them. In the east, apart from the Tian Quang tribe, there were no other overlord goblins. There were some in the west and north, but they couldn't have arrived so quickly. No matter how he thought, he couldn't figure it out. The iguana lord was extremely aggrieved. Hide well, I'm going to chase them. He could only follow the scent. If he delayed, it would dissipate. He flicked out his tongue, capturing scents. His eyes lit up, found the scent of my wife and daughter. He indeed headed in the direction Gobu Kwang and the others had gone. I will slaughter your entire tribe. At this moment, Gobu Kwang and his group had returned to the Tian Quang tribe. Boss, come quick. I brought you something good. Gobu Kwang shouted happily. Lin Tian, who was thinking about how to cultivate new goblins, heard and came over. Seeing them, he didn't care about the two iguanas they were carrying. Instead, he noticed they all had evolved. Especially Gobu Shan, who now looked so different that he wasn't recognized at first glance, almost not resembling a goblin anymore. However, a goblin was defined not by appearance, but by character and habits. Chapter 70. Mysterious Man, Instant Kill. TL. Sungman. Gobu Shan. LV 71. Race. Mutant Goblin. Profession. Battle Bone. Title. Bone Warrior. Mutant Goblin. God's Blessing. Health. 1700. Strength. 580. Defense. 700. Skills. Evil Bone Growth. Gene Devour. Equipment. Evil Bone. Overall. 3000. Looking at Gobu Shan's attribute panel, Lin Tian felt quite satisfied, though he didn't expect that Gobu Shan was still slightly weaker than that guy, Gobu Kwang. After all, he was a mutant variant. Then he looked at Gobu Tian, who resembled a little cockroach. Gobu Tian LV. 72. Race. Goblin. Profession. None. Title. Perfect Assassin. God's Blessing. Health. 1500. Strength. 490. Defense. 410. Skills. Scent Capture. Camouflage Skin. Wing Flap Acceleration. Premonition. Equipment. None. Overall. 3000. Lin Tian hadn't expected Gobu Tian's attributes to be inferior, yet his overall strength matched Gobu Shan's. It was likely because the combat power of those leaning towards an assassin role tended to be higher. If equipped with various gear, he might even be stronger. Lost in thought, Lin Tian was brought back by an angry, delicate voice. Let go of me, you damn goblins. I'm the Lord's wife. How dare you capture me? I'll have the Lord kill you and avenge my child. None of you will escape. The knocked out female iguana had awakened and was shouting incessantly. Lin Tian was somewhat bewildered and asked, Who is this? Lord, where did you capture this iguana from? We don't know. We just ran into this iguana tribe while walking. Gobu Kwang scratched his head and said. Then he chuckled. Boss, we caught them just for you. One young, one mature, depending on your taste. Ahem, I generally adhere to the principle of wanting them all. But, is this damned iguana part of that iguana lord's tribe? Lin Tian's expression turned serious. Seeing that he seemed a bit scared, the female iguana triumphantly said, That's right, my husband is the Southern Lord. Now that you know fear, it's too late. I won't let you off. However, Lin Tian's expression turned into an evil smile. His facial features twisted. He had been holding back his anger, and now it was time to vent it. Moreover, this iguana was quite beautiful. Iguana Lord, want to split my tribe? Want to kill me? Then, don't blame me for being rude tilde. Lin Tian reached out, slowly approaching the female iguana. Seeing this, the female iguana was utterly panicked, struggling to break free from Gobu Kwang's grip. Don't move, lady. You wouldn't want your husband to die, would you? As long as you let me vent enough. As he spoke, a poison arrow from an elemental hand crossbow was shot over. Not long after, the female iguana became like a puppet with its strings cut, collapsing to the ground. No, I am the Lord's wife. To be violated by goblins, by goblins. The female iguana cried, her body out of control. She was being used at will. An hour later, Lin Tian sighed. Goodness, no wonder that guy next door liked iguanas so much. Didn't expect there to be something to it. Then, he looked at the smaller iguana. He didn't let it go either, venting all his anger toward the iguana lord on his family. What did you two do to his tribe? Just captured these two. Lin Tian lay on the ground, feeling a bit tired, and asked. Gobu Tian explained. No, we mostly slaughtered and devoured them, leaving a few alive to reproduce. Hearing this, Lin Tian jumped up in shock, not expecting these three guys to take advantage of the iguana lord's absence and ransack his home. Gobu Kwang and the others were nervous, thinking they would be scolded, but Lin Tian excitedly said, Well done. Especially you, Gobu Kwang. I didn't raise you for nothing. You even brought something fun back to honor me. Now, he just wanted to see how that guy would react when he found out who the real culprit was. Speaking of the devil, he appeared. Damn goblins. Get out here. Give me back my wife and daughter. Outside the Tian Kwang tribe, the iguana lord tracked the scent to this place. He never expected it to be the Tian Kwang tribe that did it. They had just torn each other's faces, and in such a short time, they had massacred his tribe. He couldn't tolerate it. The iguana lord charged in, breaking down the door and swinging his tail, killing a few big variants. Coldly, he said, "Today, I won't leave a single one of your tribe alive." Blood for blood. Roaring, he saw his wife and daughter on the ground. He looked as if struck by lightning. Immediately, he froze. Oh, what a coincidence. I just finished. If you want to leave now, I might let you go. If you don't, then, you'll die. Lin Tian said, his smile wicked and cold. The iguana lord was furious, but he first asked, "Wife, daughter, are you all right? Did these low-level monsters do anything to you?" "Who husband? I feel great now, even better than before." "You should leave. I want to stay here." The female iguana's words struck like a bolt from the blue. The blush on her face, her warm breath, and that look of longing and attachment. It was as if a needle pierced the iguana lord's heart. He understood the implication of her words. A double blow to his dignity and body. Even his daughter said coquettishly, "Dad, I'll stay here with Mom. I'll take good care of him." As she spoke, she snuggled up to Lin Tian, like a pet. These scenes were completely unacceptable to the iguana lord, making him feel like today was surreal. Not a dream but a nightmare. His tribe was slaughtered, leaving only a few survivors, and his wife and daughter were. "I'll kill all of you. Especially you." The iguana lord gritted his teeth until they bled and suddenly launched an attack. His speed was immense, smashing large sections of the rock underfoot. Seeing him approach, Gobu Kwang directly blocked in front. Even though he was using magic now, his strength hadn't diminished. He forcefully engaged the iguana lord, and both were pushed back. How is this possible? A mere leader variant actually. The iguana lord couldn't believe it, looking at Gobu Kwang in astonishment. At this moment, Lin Tian gestured for them to stop. "Since this guy wants to die, I'll take care of him. I've wanted to kill him for a long time anyway. Killing him would mean becoming the new Southern Lord. At worst, he'd send Gobu Shan or Brutal over to take the position. He didn't necessarily have to do it himself. But killing him would truly relieve his anger. Although he had already vented everything on the mother-daughter iguana pair. The iguana lord was furious, wanting to summon monsters but realized this was the East, not under his jurisdiction. He coldly snorted, "Even without other monsters, I can still kill you. Necrotic cells." As he spoke, he rapidly approached Lin Tian, drooling thick, black-green saliva. He spat it madly at Lin Tian. This saliva contained numerous bacteria, at least 1 billion in a single drop. In a world without antibiotics, if it contaminated the skin, the entire body would be consumed by bacteria within 3 days. Bathing, burning, freezing, none of it worked. The bacteria couldn't be cleaned off. Even one would rapidly multiply. Lin Tian directly used the skill Brutal Roar, roaring to shatter all the saliva with sound waves. Not a drop touched him. The iguana lord, completely unprepared, stood there in a daze, his eyes rolling back. Seizing the opportunity, Lin Tian quickly approached, stabbing a dagger towards his heart. The blade only managed to scratch the scales. With quick reflexes, Lin Tian delivered another stab. This time, it pierced the skin deeply, and blood gushed out like a fountain, spraying everywhere. Undoubtedly, it hit the heart. The intense pain brought the iguana lord back to his senses, and he quickly retreated. "Damn goblin. What was that just now? I lost consciousness." He clutched his chest, where blood was gushing. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. When he removed his hand, the shocking wound had healed. Gobu Tian and the others were surprised. But Lin Tian had expected this. HMPH, super recovery, but you can only recover once. It was similar to a gecko's tail regeneration. This species had strong regenerative abilities. The iguana tribe could even survive one fatal injury. The iguana lord gritted his teeth, saying, "But I won't give you a second chance." Hormone growth. In the next second, his body began to grow larger. He grew to over 5 meters tall. His muscles bulged like stones glued to his body, and those tiny scales turned into dazzling golden armor. Covering his entire body, the iguana lord felt immensely confident. Strength. Endless strength. "What will you use to fight me?" Finished, he prepared to go all out. A thin, white membrane even covered his eyes. Now, he was practically invincible. Every inch of him had extremely high defense. The only unprotected part was under his tail, but it was impossible to attack it. Gobu Kwang and the others showed extreme caution in their expressions. Especially Gobu Tian, whose premonition told him this guy was dangerous. Lin Tian also felt some pressure and prepared to use earth elements to slow him down. He intended to get the blood of decay into his body, which would turn him impotent. Swish. At this moment, a rusty longsword pierced through the iguana lord's back. Blood spurted out again. Everyone's eyes widened, not knowing who did it. That poor quality longsword was a weapon used by big goblins. Even if Lin Tian had a fine longsword, he couldn't guarantee breaking through the iguana lord's armor. You. Who are you? Birdman. No. Let me see. The iguana lord, choking on blood, tried to turn his head to see who had ambushed him. But suddenly, the sword in his abdomen moved. Slash. In the next second, the longsword sliced through the iguana lord like cutting a cake. From bottom to top, it cut him in half.